Members, good afternoon. That is us into public session now, and welcome to everybody to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. So I'll do the housekeeping first as normal. So I'd advise members and remind you that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and I would advise those in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and all devices are muted, and it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies. I have apologies from Pat Sheehan, the Deputy Chair, and also just to note that both John Burrows and Cara Hunter are joining remotely, and for both those members, if they're having any issues with their connection, audio, video, do just let us know through the clerk and her team, and we'll try and address that. Any other apologies? No, I think that's everyone else here. So item 2 is Chairperson's business. So just have one item in there. Members will know the clerk had circulated the terms of reference for the SEN inquiry. An amended version is in your tabled papers. So just want to get any feedback if there's anything further that members want to add to that, or if we're content to endorse. And I would just maybe highlight that the main omission from that, there has been some just refining down just to maybe just clarify some language, but aside from that, the main omission is that there isn't currently a study visit being proposed. Hadn't had a clear venue identified or a location, but happy to have a conversation on that if anybody does want to make any proposal or suggestion around a study visit to inform the evidence, or on the terms of reference more generally. All content to endorse those terms of reference as drafted then? Okay, so that's that done. So can I just check then we're now in a position we can circulate that with stakeholders, and we can go from there. So conscious just on the inquiry that we're currently intending to have that done by recess at Christmas. We'll obviously have to just review those if we get a huge surge of interest in terms of presenting on this, which is a possibility. We can have a look at whether we do need to consider extra evidence sessions, although we may find a lot of people prefer to send in written evidence, but we'll keep a watching brief on that. Currently, as you'll see from the forward work plan, which we'll get to later in the agenda, we are aiming to bring things to a conclusion by Christmas. Okay, item 3 then is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations they want to make about any item on the agenda today? Nope. Anything arises, as usual, please do just indicate so that can be noted. Item 4 on the agenda then is matters arising. So in your tabled papers, you will have some correspondence which was sent in by John Burrows, who had raised issues in relation to Storm Amy and the response to that. We also have a separate letter tabled from the Minister in relation to the same issue. So it might be worth, just because it has only just been tabled, the ministerial letter, so just to maybe give members a quick overview of that. But essentially the Minister has contacted us in a letter that was sent yesterday to advise that he felt there was need for a bit of a lessons learned exercise to be undertaken from that, and I have to say I would certainly agree with that, and I would note that I welcome the Minister's agreement to carry out a review, and it looks like a fairly short and prompt review into those issues around the response. I certainly received a lot of correspondence, particularly from school leaders who were quite frustrated with how it was handled. I don't think we want to see a scenario where we have school leaders welcoming children in through the school gate and receiving an email at the same time to say you need to close in 3 hours as parents are driving off to work. It really was not ideal timing when we had really good advance warning of that. So I'm certainly very happy to note and welcome the Minister's letter. But at this point I'll hand over to John, as he had made some specific proposals around committee response to this. So John, are you connected okay for audio to come in to speak to this item? Not sure if John is hearing us. John, just to double check if you're connected okay. It's the item of correspondence you had raised.
I don't think John.
He's not hearing us.
No, I think there's obviously an audio issue there. So if somebody was able to reach out to John, we can maybe park this item for now.
He's looking at us now.
Okay, John, John, can you hear us okay?
trying to...
Yes, I can, yeah.
Oh, you're in now. That's perfect. You were about to miss your moment there. So no, item 4 on matters arising. So I've just spoken to the Minister's letter, which has confirmed the department is undertaking a review of the response to the storm last week. But you'd made some specific comments that you wanted to raise with committee. So happy to hand over to you to speak to those.
Yeah, I just think I'd be keen to speak to the EA again, just on the overall handling of it. And by the way, I'm not in any way navel gazing or armchair generaling. It's simply that after you've got an incident like we had, there's always learning to be had out of it. And I do think in terms of contingency planning, plus one thing I'm very keen on looking at is how we communicate in a moment of crisis or emergency between the EA and schools. So just be keen to have an opportunity to speak to the EA to try and get those ask some of those questions. I did write to the Minister also about a debrief, and he has committed obviously to having one.
Thanks for that, John. So I'll happy to open this up to other members. I can see Danny has indicated. I'll bring Danny in a moment. I just wanted to double check because I wasn't sure where your connection was at just in the initial discussion around this item. Have you seen the letter from the Minister that he's undertaking a full review of this, which to me feels fairly comprehensive, and perhaps after that's concluded that might be the best point to engage. It does seem to be addressing a lot of the issues, concerns that I've noted. Certainly I would share.
Sure, just you may need to refresh his... I know it cut me out at the start, was sort of having to refresh your...
Yeah, you may need to refresh your table papers just to get that. But look, I'll bring Danny in while you're getting a chance to look at that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's welcome what the Minister said, because I was on a school visit when the email dropped. I was there at 9:30, and the chaos that ensued was parents pulling up at straight away, and it made it very difficult for them. But I also had 3 children in 3 different schools in West Belfast, and I suppose the issue there was when Antrim was in the amber. When you read the letter, the Western Corridor, it's almost like they forgot that Belfast was a part of Antrim, and then you have a situation where some parts of Belfast are actually County Down.
Yeah, that's in East Belfast. It was, are we Antrim or are we Down?
So, and the weather didn't stop, and I suppose the warnings were there, and there was any lesson we learned at that time. The weather probably wasn't all that bad. There was heavy rain at the time when the kids were getting out. But in my own wee part of the world, like a girl was travelling home, well, it would have been around the end of school time, and a tree went right through her car, and she was very lucky. Very, very lucky. So it just shows how serious it can be, and they just... Well, the warnings are there. Okay, maybe if it doesn't land and be as bad, maybe that's what sometimes they're worried about. I just think the safest approach and get loads of time for preparation would be key.
I think that's the point, is that we did have early warning of this, and of course safety has to be the priority, and it's just hard to understand why it was left to such a late stage, to communicate with schools. And I agree, far better to have a scenario where the weather doesn't turn out to be as bad as we thought, but we've erred on the side of caution rather than chancing our arm on it. So I think that's a fair point. Gary, you'd indicated.
Just to obviously welcome the Minister's letter. I think that sort of sharp review will be timely. Like other people, I was caught in that as well. It's a balance because there are some parents who believe that if you take the decision too early, that also that's not ideal, because then if it comes to nothing, but at the same time, obviously you can't take a risk when it comes to health and safety. Certainly some of the principals that I spoke to did welcome the fact, whilst the decision was late, they welcomed the decision, because in the past some schools, certainly in my area, have taken decisions to close themselves. Other schools haven't, and that creates a pressure then from parents as to, well, why is that school closing and my school isn't? So I think people welcome the decision. It's just, I think, reviewing how the decision's made and when it's made is the key.
Yeah. I think we're all going to receive the same feedback on this, and I think it's all about that balance. David, you don't want to come in?
Just in terms of John's proposal, I understand the logic in it, but I think given the Minister's outlined that he's going to do a review, I think it's best to put that on ice until we see what comes out of that review itself.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I've just read that, so yes, I'm more than happy with that. We'll put it on ice and see what comes out of that. Fairly comprehensive assurance that he's going to do a full review. And again, it's just, there's always an opportunity to learn, good and bad, there'll be out of that. And I do think, I just thought critical communication with schools. I think emails, some kind of mobile app that a button can be pressed and an alert goes to all principals. It's just something that would allow us to communicate critical messaging fast. But yes, I'll await the outcome of the review.
That's great. No, thank you for raising, John. I think your point around how it's communicated, you'll often have at the time this message landed. I know a lot of principals were standing at the school gate. They certainly weren't checking their emails. So again, it's again how effective is that communication. So
one thing I would say, Chair, is wherever this lands, if it ends up being a more cautious approach of future, I think everybody needs to bear it in mind that they're sort of damned if they do, damned if they don't. And actually, if we decide on the line where EA makes a call one way or the other, that's going to be the policy going forward. And because I think you do have a situation where you're never going to please all the people all the time around these things.
Absolutely. I think that the key is that whatever communication goes out, it should be clear.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree with that entirely.
So that's maybe the key point. Okay, well look, that deals with that action. So we can move on to.
Sorry, could I come in just under Matters Rising? If that's, I'm not sure whether this is the right place or not, but I just wanted to raise an issue. So since in terms of school uniforms and school uniform bill, since the rejection of the sort of key amendments that this committee was bringing forward to the uniform bill, we've taken on a series of engagement with the Bills Office, and it's really to look at what other courses of action might be. And we were all given a job to do, and we took on that job in really good faith in looking at this uniform legislation. And we believe that after speaking to the Bills Office that a committee bill would represent the best way forward to try and address the gaps that we feel that are in the Minister's legislation. There's a number of different things and issues around this. We know that a committee bill would take priority over any other private members' bills, and given the time that there is left in this mandate, we feel that it's a viable way forward to try and introduce I suppose school uniform legislation that we can see is actually going to make a difference. So again, if this is the right forum to do it, well, then I want to make a proposal that the committee does pursue a committee bill on the issue to ensure that whatever legislation is delivered is actually going to make a difference for families and on the issues of affordability and equality as well.
Thank you, Cathy. I mean, again, probably AOB would be too late, I think, in the meeting. Probably that there's going to need to be a discussion in the round on this one. Look, I'm happy to open this up to members, and possibly it might be appropriate to bring the clerk in to discuss any sort of procedural issues that might arise in relation to this, and also committee capacity if the members do have any questions on that. So we can do that if required. I've seen your indication, David. I think Cara online there had indicated first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, just to say, if it's a formal proposal, I'm more than happy to second. I'm so disappointed to see just the level of work we all put in, the number of meetings that we had on Tuesday mornings at committee in our own private capacity, teachers, parents, everybody we've spoken with. And then to be where we are now, it's just, to be honest, I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken for parents, and I don't feel it's strong enough as it currently stands. So me and the SDLP would be open to a committee bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. David, you'd indicate?
Chair, it'll probably not surprise you, but I'm satisfied with the bill as it stands. I'm confident that the Minister will ensure that it will take the actions needed to provide the support necessary to parents and reassurance to parents on that. I would have concerns that we are already pressed for committee time, that we have already spent a lot of time on RSE. We have now moved on to SEN, which is probably the most critical issue within our education service, and I would be worried about how that affects our time and our ability to deal with that and other issues that were within the education system going forward. I think we have spent considerable time on this. I understand it didn't land the way everybody would have liked that. I think that's the manner of legislation in this place, and we're certainly satisfied with the bill as it stands and would not be supporting the proposal to spend more committee time on it.
Thank you, David. I'll speak to it. I'm not seeing any other indications, but please do come in. I'll speak to it from my perspective. So if I can maybe just speak to it as chair first of all. David, I share your concern around committee capacity. That would be my first point on this. I think looking at the forward work plan, I'm not seeing any gaps in our agenda that won't involve possibly either legislation the department's bringing through or indeed inquiry business being potentially bumped to make space for this. So I would just caution on that note. The other thing that I would add is that we haven't seen the guidelines yet, so we don't know. So I know that there is a huge amount of scepticism around in relation to whether this bill will be effective or not. And I've no doubt at final stage on Monday that will get a very clear airing in the chamber. And I certainly in my remarks on that will be echoing those concerns around whether that the bill will be effective. But I do think it feels to me a little preemptive to actually start using committee time for something when we haven't seen the guidelines. I would caveat that strongly with that if the guidelines are deemed and there is a committee agreement that they are not effective and don't deliver, or indeed there's a substantial delay with guidelines, because I do note we are not seeing any timescale coming forward around when they'll be provided, then I certainly from my perspective would be content to revisit this issue because I do share the concerns. I want to be really clear on that, but I would just note at this point in time I would just have a slight degree of caution. I would want to just note in terms of capacity and the timing would be my initial thoughts on this. I'm saying that largely as chair from a party political perspective, very clear, and I will be clear on that share the concerns around the bill's effectiveness, but would probably want to reserve judgment until we have something clear in terms of guidelines. Donna, you had indicated.
Yeah, I take your point on the guidelines. So I wish we had had the guidelines at the very start. I don't want to rehash all of that, but we did a lot of work in here on that. We were told to work harder by the Minister, which I think was a very unfair comment. I think the RSE inquiry was so informative and so important, as well as saying it's going to be. But we proved that we can multitask. We're all very good at doing it, and this committee is very effective. So could we do a compromise where, because time's going to be against us, and we do want the best results for families when it comes to uniform and for our children, and we want a child-centred approach, and that was about the evidence we heard in here, and that was what we worked towards as a committee of all the amendments. Look, I don't share the view that this was how legislation works. It actually goes against that. I was actually perplexed about how this is all unfolded, because we should have had an opportunity to debate in a democratic chamber our amendments, because they were within the scope of the bill, and we didn't get that opportunity. And I'll leave that for people to make up their own mind why that happened. I know what my view is on that. So where we haven't seen the guidelines, and I do take the point, Chair, could we at least do the preparatory work for even the policy intent of what we want to do with a committee bill? So at least we have that. So the guidelines are not good enough, that we're not starting from scratch, and that we can get this going and work in parallel, and at the very least show that we are still willing to deliver for families out there.
Thank you, Donny. And look, I can respond, but it may be appropriate to bring the clerk in. But I know Gary has indicated, and then Michelle. So let every member have a say, and then we can maybe.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just want to concur, obviously, with what David has said and what you have actually said, Chair, as well. I think that we need to make sure that with the limited time left, a piece of work has been done on the school uniforms bill. Obviously, it hasn't satisfied everybody, although it is progress. And I think that and to do something in advance of seeing the guidelines, I think would not be appropriate. And obviously with 2027 coming quite quick, ultimately there will be potentially a new minister, potentially a new committee who ultimately can review what the success of the bill will be. And I think that would be certainly the most appropriate way. I think to go in advance of that, I think would be certainly, from my opinion, a waste of the clerk or any of the staff's time without having seen the guidance.
Gary and Michelle.
I mean, the only thing I was going to add is that the aspect here of the schools and the timing of guidelines would be anticipated for them to allow them to prepare. I think we should give that the time. if the Minister pushes that out in some kind of manoeuvre here to avoid this, I would be disappointed. But we do need that anyway, and if it's late, then I think we have grounds to come in and consider other options. But I think we should give space for the guidelines to come forward to see if they meet our expectations. If they don't, then we can consider it at that point. But I do share the overall concerns with the bill and what has been presented so far, but we shouldn't just be, I suppose, creating more uncertainty for schools really through all of this.
I think that's a point that we should definitely consider in reaching a decision on this, that I think schools will already be feeling a sense of uncertainty because they also have not seen the guidelines and they have prospectuses that need to go out for publication probably within the next month, and without the guidelines but a sense that something is going to change, I think that there will be anxiety there. I think if potentially there was a sense that a new set of requirements could then be imposed on them in a number of months' time, it may leave schools feeling very uncertain as to how they navigate that, and potentially parents worried about 2 uniform policy changes in the course of a calendar year. So I think if we did embark on the course, I would be feeling very clear. I'd want to be assured in my mind that the guidelines were not delivering, so that we could stand over that decision. But look, I think we need to reach a decision on this. Can I just check, Danny, in terms of that sort of initial preparatory work? Do members feel it would be helpful maybe for the clerk to speak to that in terms of what scope there would be to do that element of the work first, just so we have all the options in front of us?
Yeah, members, I did, the last time we were talking about the outworkings of the consideration stage, I did advise you that there was budget and capacity in the non-executive bill unit, and time-wise it might be possible to deliver a committee bill in the remaining 18 months of the mandate. That is obviously subject to competing priorities. And I have just been engaging, now that's very impromptu, I didn't have anticipation of that coming up just now, but I have been in contact to see whether an exploratory approach like you've outlined, Danny, would be possible, and they are willing to support the committee in scoping out a policy intention and as we wait for the guidelines, if that's what the committee wishes to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. And can I just check in terms of where that would sit? That would sit with the Bills office, is that right? With that support coming through?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Bills office work on both executive and non-executive legislation.
Okay. So it would be a Bills office function. Okay.
Yeah.
So just to be clear then, is the proposal for full steam ahead with a committee bill, or is the proposal for that scoping work at this stage?
If we could get if you'd be happy with that, Chair, we would be happy to go with that compromise.
Okay. Well, I think this may come to a division. Can I just check for John? I'm not sure if you had wanted to come in just to make sure we've heard all voices around the table here.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I conscious of capacity, and second of all, I have no real concerns about the bill. So I don't share the concerns.
Okay, no, that's fine. Just to make sure we had heard from everybody. I wasn't sure if you'd been trying to come in there, John. Apologies. Yeah. So look, I think we have a proposal, which is to engage with the Bills office around initial scoping work around the potential for a committee bill. Okay. And am I understanding this right? Just to make sure we know exactly what we're making a decision on. This is in relation to a bill to effectively amend the school uniforms bill that is coming to final stage next week. Yep. Okay. So can I just put it out there, our members are in agreement around carrying out the scoping work, so no. So is this, we'll move this to division. So Clerk, would you be able to run the vote on this then?
Okay, so the proposal is that the committee undertake preparatory policy work with the non-executive bill team on school uniforms amendment bill.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's while waiting for the guidelines, or is that part of it?
While waiting for the works there.
Okay.
Should we need to kick on? That means we haven't lost time.
Okay.
So I'll that's the proposal. Could all those in favour?
Say aye. Indicate please.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No.
Okay. And all those against?
No.
Okay, so the outcome then is
that it's a 6-3 in favour of the proposal.
So the proposal is carried then. So
Carried, yeah.
we're in a scenario where we'll be in some engagement with the Bills Office around preparatory work. I would want to be clear on that for me the decisive factor on where this goes from here is the content of the guidelines. And I think we need to, I think to be fair, really from my perspective, to be fair to schools, that is really important, that we're not asking them to do this policy review work twice. But I think being prepared is never a bad thing, so I was content to support that. Okay, so anything else that matters arising that we're wanting to bring in? Nope. So we'll move on to item 5 then. That's the draft minutes. So I'd refer members to the draft minutes of the Education Committee meeting of the 1st of October, and that's at page 8 of your packs. Can I seek members' agreement that those minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, got a copy of those to just... Okay, so that takes us to item 6 on the agenda, and it's a oral briefing from SEN Reform NI, and that forms part of our inquiry into special educational needs services in Northern Ireland. So I don't know if the witnesses are here and available to come through. Yes, so
online already.
Okay, so are they joining us online today then?
Dorothy is online.
Okay, yeah. So if they're joining us
Fiona
online,
also.
so if
Okay,
they're
Fiona
able to
also.
bring the witnesses through, and then I'll refer members to the briefing note from the committee clerk. That's at page 15 of your packs. The briefing paper provided by SEN Reform NI at page 17, and a report from SEN Reform NI which was delivered in conjunction with Caleb's Cause, which is at page 20 of your packs. So we've got witnesses joining by Zoom, and I'm sure they can do more detailed introductions, but we're really delighted to have representing SEN Reform NI today. We have Dorothy Murray, and then we also have Fiona Cole, who is representing SEN Reform NI in a voluntary capacity today. So for members who aren't aware, and I'm sure the witnesses can provide a bit of background, SEN Reform NI is a SEN support group and lobby group representing the voices of parents in relation to special educational needs provision in Northern Ireland. So you're all both very welcome here today. We're really delighted that you've given your time to present to committee. All members around the table were clear at the outset that hearing from parents was absolutely critical to the evidence that we're going to gather. We need to understand what the reality of parental experience in the system is, so that we have something that we can then compare that to in terms of the information we're hearing from the EA and department. So I'm really very happy to hand over to you at this stage. Your briefing paper was very concise and clear, but if you have any opening remarks or presentation you want to run through, if I could ask for that up to 10 minutes, we'll then move into question and answer. And if I can just ask that we'll aim to keep each inquiry from each member to 5 minutes. So just to bear that in mind in terms of even just how long you take to answer the questions, so that we can get round everyone in the room. And just so you're aware, we have 2 members joining us virtually. You may not be able to see them in the room at the moment. Okay, so over to yourselves, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you all today. So my name is Dorothy Murray, and I'm here alongside Fiona Cole as parent representative with SEN Reform NI. We are a voluntary parent-led group. Since June 2023, when we formed, we have been working to advocate and lobby for equity of access to education for children with special educational needs and disabilities in Northern Ireland. We began as a few parents facing our own personal challenges navigating the SEN system. Since then, the group has grown to represent almost 2,000 families across Northern Ireland. In June of this year, in partnership with Caleb's Cause NI, we published our second annual report drawing on 317 responses from families. These responses provide a clear and sobering picture of the continuing challenges in SEN education. Our mission is quite simple: to ensure that every child with SEN has their right to a quality education upheld without their families having to fight endlessly for it. We do want to acknowledge the progress made. Parents welcome the Department of Education's end-to-end review of SEN. the Education Authority's work on its transformation programme, and the prioritisation of SEN within the programme for government. These are positive commitments. However, families tell us that these commitments are not yet felt in daily life, while strategies exist, delivery has not caught up with promise. In our 2025 survey, 77% of parents said their child did not have the same opportunity to learn as their non-SEN peers. That is 3 out of 4 families who believe the system is structurally inequitable. As one parent told us, children with a disability are not valued by the system. They are invisible and hidden. We would have a more caring society if inclusivity was truly respected and implemented. The first major issue is school placements. Both parents and political representatives are by now familiar with the yearly crisis. From our survey, only 61% of parents felt their child's placement met their needs, a decline from the previous year. Placements are too often confirmed at the last minute, creating what parents describe as an annual scramble. Families cannot plan and children are left anxious. Some children still had no placement at the start of term. Others were offered places in schools where no classroom was ready and no start date has been provided. This is unimaginable for children in mainstream schools, yet SEN children are routinely placed in this position. It is not equity, it is a breach of duty. For those children unable to start school at the same time as their peers, there is nothing put in place by way of education during this wait, and the children are missing out on vital time of their education. As well as this, we are now seeing more and more children unable to attend school due to the settings being unsuitable for them, which causes the children to become anxious and stressed. We understand the EA is now introducing a new strategy to recognise the children on the register, but we already have Article 86 of the GTCNI Order 1998, whereby EA should be making arrangements for the provision of suitable education at school or otherwise. This goes against law. Parents ask a very fair question. If non-SEN children know their placement in April, why must SEN families wait until August or even later? We then have the issue of specialist provisions that have been funded by the EA. They have been staffed and set up ready to welcome children and equipped with a wealth of knowledge and experience. Yet to this day, they are sitting empty with no children allocated to attend. Why do we have children with no placements if we have several specialist provisions ready and waiting? Why are the EA offering mainstream settings with a one-to-one instead when these placements are available? The second theme is trust. Parents recognise the effort within the department and the EA, but the trust is badly broken. In our survey, 68% rated communication with the EA as poor or very poor. Families describe being ignored, passed from one officer to another and left in the dark for months. Too many parents feel their children are treated as numbers on a spreadsheet rather than as individuals. In some cases, children are placed in schools unwilling to accept them. For any parent, the idea of sending your child to a school that does not want them is heartbreaking. Belonging is not a luxury, it is fundamental to education. From listening to the EA in previous evidence sessions with you, the committee, we have heard numerous times that their decisions are child-centred and based on the needs of the children first and foremost. Parents and carers we have heard from feel anxious about the future and are unsure that decisions are based on children's needs first. For example, the criteria for a placement in a special school has previously been far-ranging from moderate learning difficulty, behavioural issues and severe learning difficulties. However, parents are telling us that they have been told by the EA that this has changed. It appears to parents that there is a lack of transparency in relation to the criteria for access to a special school placement to only children with profound needs. The statementing process, the EA has said previously, they want to reduce the number of statements being awarded to children as they hope they will get the intervention needed before this stage. A statement is a legal document that requires the EA to uphold their part by law. Parental referrals for statements, around 96 to 97% are declined, and parents then have to appeal and fight, despite them having the lived experience with the child and knowing them best. Parents feel that the decisions being made by the EA are stripping the children of their legal rights and the criteria seems to constantly change, again to the detriment of our children, not to better them or their education. Third, there are concerns about specialist provision in mainstream schools. Parents told us that some SPEM classrooms were under-resourced and inadequately equipped, with little evidence of long-term planning for expansion. Training of staff is inconsistent. Parents want to know who is delivering this training and is it neuroaffirming? Recruitment difficulties mean that classroom assistants are often hired without SEN experience. Parents are telling us that it wasn't that long ago the EA wanted to cut down the numbers of classroom assistants, but now they are undertaking a huge recruitment drive for classroom assistants and also one-to-one assistants, as more children are being forced into a mainstream setting. And this is not being the correct place for them to thrive. We again have heard in the recent sessions that the EA feel parents believe that having a one-to-one assistant is the gold standard. This cannot be further from the truth. Parents push for a one-to-one for their children in mainstream settings because it is the only way they feel they can ensure their safety, as the mainstream setting is not the correct place for them. We have more and more children with complex needs being placed into mainstream schools, and with the normality being one teacher, one assistant per classroom, they cannot guarantee the safety for all children, especially those with SEN. Most importantly, many children's statements include therapy, support linked to health services, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, nursing. In special schools, there is a clear pathway, but in SPIMS, there is no consistency. Parents feel that for the SPIMS where the children are not receiving the necessary therapies, what then happens to the children once they are of leaving school age and have not received appropriate education to try and get them to their optimum potential? Parents are asking, what is the role of health in the new lit teams? Without proper integration, children will be placed in settings where their legal entitlements simply cannot be delivered. The fourth issue, and one of the most urgent in terms of volume of concern, is school transport. Every August, parents wait anxiously to learn how their child will travel to school. Many do not know who will pick their child up until days before term, or if at all. This uncertainty makes childcare and employment almost impossible to manage. For children with SEN who rely on routine and familiar adults, the disruption is devastating. Safety concerns are equally serious. Parents report children being transported without legally required car seats, and subcontractor vetting remains unclear. The EA assures families that private contractors are checked, but the position with subcontractors is far less transparent. We would like the EA to provide information on their policies regarding the safeguarding of transport and our children, especially for the subcontractors. We have heard reports from parents that ex-SNIs have come back with convictions flagged, but the person is still able to transport some of our most vulnerable children. Parents need clarity and more transparency regarding the safety of their children. Parents would also like to know who the responsibility lies with if an incident happens and the child has not got the correct car seat, or if the driver has convictions. Again, driving laws are not being adhered to in relation to the car seats. Looking ahead, transitions are another crisis point. The Code of Practice states that planning should begin at 14, yet in our survey, only 25% of parents of 14 to 19-year-olds had seen a transition plan. Even more concerning, 64% of parents did not know that their child's statement ends at 19. Families describe this as falling off a cliff. On post-19 provision, the findings are stark. 96% of parents want legislation to protect education and support after the age of 19. 98% believe governments should be legally accountable. 74% rated current post-19 provision as 1 out of 10. Unlike England and Wales, where education, health and care plans can extend to 25, Northern Ireland offers no statutory protection. This leaves young people abandoned at the very stage where structure and opportunity are the most needed. Finally, I must highlight the emotional toll. The words used by parents in our survey are stark: soul-destroying, traumatizing, gaslighting, dehumanizing. 81% of parents described the statement process in negative terms, worse than in 2024. Parents spoke of giving up work, suffering deteriorating mental health, and feeling forced into legal action simply to secure what should already be their child's right. In 2025, 41% of families reported seeking legal advice or representation, up from 29% the year before. This is not a system of support, it is a system of battles, and the cost is borne by the families. We have heard the EA in their last evidence session say they are not perfect and they do make mistakes, but it is important they learn from them so as not to make them again. Parents feel there has been no learning as the same mistakes are being repeated every day, despite happening numerous times previous. We have received serious reports of data breaches happening since we formed in 2023, alongside incidents with transport and children's safety, and we are still to this day receiving reports of the same incidents. The EA's mission statement is to provide a high quality education for every child. Based on the evidence provided, this is not what is happening for children with special educational needs and disabilities. Committee members, parents are not asking for the impossible. They're asking for what the law already guarantees. Timely, lawful statements, suitable resource placement, safe, consistent transport, cross-departmental support that recognises health and education are inseparable, and statutory protections for young people aged 19 to 25. The department's reviews and strategies show recognition of the issues, but recognition without change is not enough. Families are asking you as legislators to ensure accountability, to move from reports and pilots to real enforceable action. Every child with SEN is first and foremost a child with the same rights, hopes and potential as any other. We must stop treating them as afterthoughts and start treating them as priorities. After the session, we would like to provide you with some itemised feedback from some of our parents. This will show you the reality of what families go through every day to try and secure an education for their child. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. And look, as I said at the start, your written briefing was really clear and concise. I wish every briefing we got in advance of a committee session was as clear in what these are the issues. This is what we think needs to happen. Yeah. It certainly helps members to focus when it comes to asking questions. Look, that's really helpful evidence. I'm just going to say for the benefit of members, we don't have the deputy chair here today. Normally I bring members in once the deputy chair's in. Please just start indicating through the clerk, and we'll go from there. So please, I'm going to open up the indications for that now. So in terms of questions, it's really hard to know where to start actually, because, and I think we all feel this with SEN, and it's really the reason why we're running the inquiry, that it can feel overwhelming. In fact, in terms of just the scope of the issues and how interconnected they all are. You did speak about placements in a lot of detail and that scramble for places. I'm not going to focus on that. We've had, as I'm sure you've heard from the EA in the sessions so far, we've had really quite clear assurances that they are very confident they're going to deliver a better process this year. So I'm very much in the mode of watching that space, but we were also very clear that they have advised the window of time to get that right is shortening rapidly, and we will certainly be at some point over the autumn, I think, be wanting to get a very clear steer that we're not heading towards the scramble again. But we've had some quite clear assurances there's progress. But I did want to focus on what you asked. You referenced around the appropriateness of placements. Can you expand on that at all in terms of the sort of scenarios that parents are raising through your forums in terms of what those inappropriate placements might look like and the impact of that?
Yeah. So starting off, we have had a lot of parents coming to us regarding SPIMS. So we are getting feedback. Some of them work very well. Others are not up to the standard of where they should be. So that obviously creates an unsuitable setting for a child and adds anxiety and stress onto a child. We also have a lot of parents, especially for nursery places, where a lot of children will be given a placement in a mainstream nursery with one-to-one, while they look for specialist provision for P1. Again, we have a lot of parents coming to us. Their children are on reduced timetables. The parents are being called day to day to do nappy changes. They don't get the same opportunities as their peers. I myself have went through this transition. My daughter had a mainstream nursery place with one-to-one. Unfortunately, it took for most of the year for the one to get a one-to-one embedded after the interviewing process and all that had happened and the GTCNI checks. So in between that time, my daughter was on a reduced timetable for most of that year until the one-to-one came. And even when the one-to-one came, it was increased by 15-minute increments every day, or every week, sorry. I was called when she needed her nappy changed. My daughter was non-verbal and has severe learning difficulties. She got a one-to-one because there was a safety concern for her because she puts everything into her mouth, and the teachers couldn't guarantee me that she would be kept safe from choking hazards or anything like that. That really caused a lot of issues, not just for my daughter, who that was the only option available to us. It impacted the rest of the family. You know, it impacted myself and my partner's work commitments. It impacted my other children as well. So, you know, we have these placements that just are not suitable. They're not meeting the needs of the children. And even with the one-to-one support, the one-to-one she had was absolutely amazing. They couldn't have done enough for her, but it just was not the correct setting for her at all. And she spent a year there.
Dorothy, just to come in there, because I think it's an important point. What is your assessment of the role of specialist provisions in the education system? Do you think they have a role? Can they work effectively, or is your sense that it's a model that isn't working?
I think first and foremost, for them to work effectively, health has to be closely integrated. Without the health, I cannot see them working at all. A lot of our children depend on speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, which is all part of their education. So if they are not receiving that and they're on long waiting lists, then I don't feel that's a suitable setting. You have to meet all of the needs of the children in those settings. That is a big issue, and it's a big concern for parents, because it seems to be where the future's going to go. Some SPIMs, if the staff are trained and have knowledge of saying, yes, it will be good. We are finding, though, that parents are telling us that staff are being brought on without experience, so it's not going to work that way. You know, there's so many factors that need to happen, and the cogs all need to work together on that. It's not just a one size fits all, and it also depends on the different needs of the child. So we have SPIMs for social and communication. We also have SPIMs for just purely for autistic children. We have SPIMs for behavioural issues. So it really does just go on what those needs are for the child.
You know, that's really helpful. So if I'm hearing you right, that if they're properly planned, properly staffed with trained staff for some children, and with the interaction with health, they can work. But obviously, I think from your earlier evidence, there is a concern around access to special school placements as well, in terms of whether there is enough capacity in the system for that. So look, there's so much to cover, and I know other members will hopefully get round all of the issues. I think the interaction with health is well noted. I just wanted to pick up really quickly on the transition planning and the post-19. Now, I know once we get after 19, currently not education's responsibility. In terms of the evidence you've shared, 25% of the parents that you're engaging with were aware of the transition planning process at all. It was so that's 75% we can assume it's not happening for, and that really is borne out by engagement we've had with the EA really around that. In terms of there is definitely a bigger piece around what happens post-19. What's your assessment of the effectiveness of transition planning as it currently stands for those young people with SEN in the system who are looking to move on beyond post-primary education?
Well, firstly, the transitions, they actually need to happen. For starters, that would be a good starting point there. As well as that, you know, everyone needs to come together at that point as well, because this is such a massive transition for children. in general, regardless of, you know, whether they're neurodivergent or not. So then when you have all these added factors of, you know, needs of a child, it's going to be tenfold. So everyone needs to come together. Everyone needs to be a part of that discussion. Health do need to be included in that as well. It has to be, you know, across all of the departments to work together, and as well the parents' voice as well, because parents do know their children the best. You know, they cater to their every need 24/7. You know, so they do need to be a part of what their children's future is then going to look like, because every child's future will look different to their peers. I'm not sure if Fiona might have some. Do you want to?
Yeah, thank you. So,
Yeah.
obviously, of the 74% of people who rated it as poor, when they were asked of what forms of post-19 provision that they would like to see, family expressed strong interest in a range of specialist options that were child-centred or young person-centred. The most frequently suggested were specialist further education colleges, day placements focused on life skills rather than formal education, and more general day opportunities. There was also a correlation in being able to transition from both not just education into health settings, but for those children who have aspirations of employment, that transition settings kind of has to work in tandem with the post-19 opportunities. And we really do want to see that in the disability strategy that has just been launched by the Department for Communities. It has to be successful, it has to be person-centered, and it also has to be in conjunction with the family. Not one pathway will be suitable for another child just because they have the label of SEN. So I hope that answers your question, Chair, but we're happy to take any more at the same time.
No, it absolutely does, and I think it just is a reminder that we probably, we definitely need to make sure that we don't overlook transitions in this, and like this committee inquiry is probably not going to sort out the issue of what final legislative proposals would look like, although we may have some views on that we can express in our report. But I'm just really conscious that it feels to me that the transition process, even when it does happen, it doesn't seem to happen particularly effectively. And I think that linkage with health and even parents understanding what day opportunities are out there, if that's the right model. Will they need a learning disability assessment if one hasn't been done to access those, if they go down that route? Where does careers advice sit for those who are wanting to move into an employment pathway? There is just so much there. So that I think that's really important that we don't lose sight of that in some of the other issues that are further upstream in the system. So going to open up to other members now. I think Cara had indicated first.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Dorothy and Fiona for just such an incredible briefing. I went through it, very detailed and extremely helpful, certainly for us as a committee. Dorothy, you started off really strong talking about structurally inequitable. What powerful words. I think that really resonates with the number of parents that I've spoken with who are just gutted by this system. They'd have no hope whatsoever. And I think a really interesting aspect as well with the safeguarding with travel and our SEN children. So thank you so much. That's definitely an aspect within this inquiry we in the committee will be following up on. Just two real questions for you both, just whoever it resonates with. Communication with parents from the EA has been something that has been raised time and time again. A lot of parents have said once they've received a diagnosis or a statement, it just feels like they're on their own. They're navigating this by themselves. Very difficult to find even a simple piece of paper that summarizes who you go to, who you speak with, and how to advocate for the rights of your child. I think there's a real miscommunication there, a real lack of effective public messaging from the EA. How do you think that can be improved? Because ultimately, we want our parents to feel heard.
Yeah, no, totally. At the minute, what I would say is, when my daughter was diagnosed and even going through this process from meeting the guys and, starting SEN reform, it's been the parents, meeting other parents and other charities. We heard from the charity last week, Shine, and they were absolutely great. It's actually places and people like that who are filling the gaps, because without those people and places, this picture would look a whole lot worse, in my opinion. So I do think there could be more information provided by the EA, and I think, to be honest, it would be a simple, straightforward document. You know, just of go to this team, you know, it real that would not be hard to do. And once you kind of know more information, you kind of understand it a bit more. But a lot of our parents don't, again, like you said, they don't know who to turn to or who they should speak to. And you know, we do get a lot of reports in trying to get through to someone, to speak to someone in the EA at times can be very difficult, and trying to get responses. So again, they just feel lost and they don't really know where to turn to. But it's other, you know, parents and charities that then they do turn to, and they pick up a lot of the flack.
You're right. It's something as simple as an infographic that can really communicate those basics. Sometimes it really is something so simple. And one of the things you mentioned as well, Dorothy, was parents not feeling listened to. You know, if the EA are listening today, which I believe that they would be, what's the kind of, what way can they display active listening?
Well, an example is, you know, the parental referrals. 96 to 97% are automatically, you know, turned down when the parents are the ones who know the children best. You know, so I think if they were to have more connection with parents, have more of a dialogue with parents, and actually take some feedback and recommendations. You know, I know we as a group have came with numerous recommendations to the EA before. Some are quite quick wins. Obviously, we know other ones will take time, you know, but we aren't here just, you know, bash the EA. That's not what this is, you know, but you know, we are wanting to work alongside. We always have said this. We are willing to work with the EA in the department, because I don't think we can move forward without the parental feedback. You know, it's a very important part of all of the plans moving forward, and it does have to be included. I'm not sure if Fiona maybe wants to.
Yeah, I think the co-design going forward, certainly with all the announcements about special educational needs, the department have been very good in being able to create meetings and opportunities. We're also seeing open webinars with new link officers. So there is a will there, but what there isn't is consistency in the level of input that parents have, that there's not a formalized group. You know, things like review and communication has consistently been something that we have recommended. However, they've never said, well, what are the touch points in your journey with the Education Authority, your journey in getting these difficulties, and what would be your suggestions to overcome? Because ultimately, it's not the person on the phone's fault, it's the system that they work within and how difficult it is to navigate that communication. It is worth saying, though, Cara, that the problem that a lot of parents feel throughout the system is that, as Dorothy said, gaslit, mistrust. It is always that systematic structure of inequality is always being put against that individual burden, that individual choice, that it's you that's not taking the placement, whether it's suited to the child's needs or not. And we really need to take that tension of parents who are only advocating the rights of their children to them being asking too much or being seen as a burden, or that actually they should be just satisfied with what they've got. The spins would be an example of that, but we do have to say that one parent who you may be familiar with, Angela Hockey, has said that she wanted to express her feelings of that inequity. And she says that I spoke with the Committee for Education in 2018, pleading that Charlie and other kids like him had the equality and opportunity, and never would have imagined that 7 years later, I would still be pleading, begging for a place, and realizing more than ever that Charlie will never be equal and never have the opportunities in life that he should have, and that I believe the EA are quite indifferent to children with disabilities, and that as a mother with other mainstream children, I fully believe that Charlie matters less. That's a sentiment felt by so many people. They are told the only opportunity that she was given for a placement for this year was 20 miles down the road from where she lives. She has 2 other children in mainstream education. It's constantly saying, well, we're giving you opportunities, but those opportunities are not practically viable. It's our children that deserve to get the best place educational setting that meets their needs, but also it does have a reverberating consequence of the wider economy of children's jobs and livelihoods if their educational needs aren't met.
Thank you so much, Fiona. In interest of the chair not killing me,
You got in ahead of me. No, I think we're probably going to be out of time here as where we are running over. So look, this is really important evidence, and I have no desire to cut across the evidence being given at all. So if I do, sometimes when it's a virtual meeting, it's a wee bit trickier to be aware if you're cutting across people or not. So it's not my intention, but I think in the interest of time, I will probably need to bring the next member through because there's just so much to cover here. So thank you for your patience with that.
Thank you, Fiona.
Kathy, you'd indicate it next.
Thanks, Chair. Dorothy, Fiona, thanks very much for coming along and thanks for your presentation. And not just for all the lobbying you do, but I know you provide so much support for parents and for children as well. So thanks for that. Dorothy, you said so much in your opening presentation. You raised so many different issues. And we're sitting here now and we know that there's around 80 children who are not in school because their places aren't ready for them. They're off the list, but they're not in school. We know that many parents who, you have said, know their children better than anybody else are not feeling that the place they have meets their child's needs. And I will be honest, I have been completely inundated with contact from parents, from teachers, from SENCOs, from classroom assistants, from principals, from support staff and from EA staff about the reality on the ground of the support that these children are getting or not getting. Yet 2 weeks ago we sat and we listened to the acting permanent secretary say that there had been a significant step forward. We also last week sat and listened to EA leadership saying to listen to the EA. You're talking about, both of you mentioned gaslighting, but to listen to the EA and that SENCO's teachers, schools had to do better, could do better. Would you have anything to say to that? Would you have anything to respond to that with?
Personally, I think the teachers, the SENCOs, the classroom assistants, they're all earth angels because they look after our children and especially our children with SEN. I know like my daughter's school is absolutely amazing and every single one of those people are amazing. You know, they really, really are. And they provide so much more than an education to the children. They provide support for families. They provide everything you can imagine. So to hear that, it's heartbreaking because we know these people personally and we know that, you know, our children wouldn't thrive without them. You know, but as well as that, the placements not being ready is nothing new. And it's so hard sitting as a parent and seeing other children in their school uniforms going to school knowing that your child is not going, and the stress and anxiety that puts on a family. As I mentioned before, yes, we're talking about education, but it filters into every other aspect of that child's life and the lives of their families. So it's not just, it doesn't just stop with their placement, you know. And when parents aren't being told what is going on, it's not easy. And to spend all that time, you know, parents could be told more, and the placement should realistically be ready. No child should be left sitting waiting because this time that they're sitting, and I would go to say by feedback we're getting from parents that the children aren't getting any education in the interim. This is time we will never get back. So that when that child goes through their years of education and leaves school, they can't turn around and say, oh, well, hold on, actually, because I wasted nearly 1 year where there wasn't a place for me. You know, they don't get an extra year of education to make up for that. You know, and especially early intervention really is key. You know, trying to get the intervention when the children are young to try and help them go through. And it's the early intervention that is missed a lot. We cannot get that crucial time back.
And Dorothy,
you know, and it's Yeah.
All right. Do you feel that things have got any better? As that's what we're being told. Do you think there has been significant steps?
I could just add, just for a brief answer on this one, that would be great, Dorothy.
Personally, from the parental feedback we're getting, no.
Okay.
There's still so much to do. Still the same issues from 2 years ago when we started. We are still getting to this very day. We've had parents message us last week, coming up to this meeting with the same things. I think if things were better, they would have learnt from mistakes previously, and we shouldn't be hearing about quite a few of these issues. We shouldn't really be hearing about.
So possibly there's an intention that maybe the EA are more concerned about getting children placed, getting them off a list, than actually the place that they're going to. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. Yeah, I think it's more numbers on a spreadsheet budgeting than a physical child sitting in front of you with a name who means something to a family. So yeah, I would agree.
The only thing, Chair, if you'll allow me very quickly to add to that, is that the success measurements doesn't always look at partial absenteeism. It doesn't look at the school avoidance, although we are seeing measurements, but they're not being analysed. So the reality of what they're showing is only part of the picture. Yeah. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you both. Gary, you'd indicated next.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Dorothy and Fiona. It's just two questions from me. Dorothy, in your opening statement, obviously, and we read your briefing around trust, communication and belonging, and I'd written down before you said it, I used the word fundamental, and it is, because I think if you don't have that sense of belonging, then really we don't have very much. I wanted to just touch on that. So you touch on poor communication, and that's something that we hear, sadly, not just in education, we hear it with all departments, but we're here obviously to discuss education. What do you put that down to? Maybe it's a mixture of these, but when you contact EA, is it a mixture of staff pressures? Is it a lack of understanding from staff? Is it unclear remits? In your reality of what you're dealing with, like, in terms of that poor communication, is it a mixture of all those things, or is there something that particularly stands out to you as to why that communication's poor?
Well, from my own experience, I remember back when we were trying to get a placement for my daughter for P1. It was the most stressful time I think I've ever had. It was just trying to even speak to someone within the EA, just to even get an update. You would call through to the number, and you would ask to speak to your link officer who is allocated to your child's case. And 9 times out of 10, they would have been in a meeting, or they might have been off on leave, or on sick leave as well. So then there wasn't anyone who then came behind that person to provide that update. So, I remember emailing, calling multiple times a day, getting to the point where, it was desperate, but just to try and get an update. So I think it is a mixture of a lot of things, but I do believe that the communication, it wouldn't take an awful lot to, have good communication with parents. I always say, if parents were given, even if you don't have an answer, but if you can just respond to the parent and say, I don't have an answer, but I'm following up, at least the parent knows where they stand. But to not have any answers and nobody answering is worse.
No, it is, and I think it's just common decency in terms of having a response, as you say. If you don't have the answer, at least if there's an acknowledgement. So I think that's something that is useful to know, and I think one that actually should be relatively easy to fix. But we'll not hold our breath in that one. In terms of the other issue that you raised, in terms of unwilling placements, you'd said that there were children are placed in schools that are perceived by parents as unwilling to accept them, and obviously that then impacts in terms of the child's belonging. Could you maybe give us an example as to a case maybe where that has happened, and why a school, I suppose, would want to? Well, I'm assuming they wouldn't want to make a child feel like that, but how did it happen?
Yeah, well, we've heard the EA talk about when they've reached out to schools have come back and just basically said no for a variety of reasons. But, we do see a lot of attitudes. Another thing is attitudes. We have the age old, oh, well, none of these needs were here back in my day. Why are they so prevalent today? Do you know, we have that. So there are some schools where those attitudes, unfortunately, do still exist to this day. And really they shouldn't. But there are schools that will say, no, we don't want to open up to children with special educational needs. I don't have a case off the top of my head.
Oh no, that's
but
okay.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that it's the case. Yeah.
Sorry, Guy. I think so. There's as Dorothy had said, some will cite safeguarding concerns that they don't have the environment or the training to put the placement in. But there's a very hard part of a lot of children with special educational needs will have distressing behaviour, and sometimes that can come out in physical, aggressive, and verbal. And we've seen with the likes of Nikki's 2021, it's sort of too little, too late. That actually, if you don't have the right environment for these children, then they can be seen as disruptive. They can seen their distress behaviour almost escalates, and that's why there is the safety concerns, but also that the resources that mainstream school have, although it has been identified, it's just lacking in terms of what they can provide to create the best learning environment for all their children.
No, thank you. And just in the interest of time, Chair, I'm not going to ask a question on this, but just I am particularly interested in post-19 as well, and certainly with another hat in the Economy Committee, we're following that element. So it's just to let you know, we haven't forgotten about that either, but I'm sure there are other members who want to ask questions, so thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And I think we do need to make sure we do factor in that time for the transitions element of this in the inquiry. It is a really key element to it. Michelle, you'd indicated next there.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Dorothy and Fiona, for your evidence, which has been so clear and so stark. But we know we've heard these issues before, but one thing that you said actually that really resonated was we need to move from reports and pilots to delivery. I think that is absolutely on the ball. I have a particular concern around that. I think we all do, that we hear what's happening on the ground, and that is where the support needs to go. And yet we're hearing about some pilot projects that are happening under the guise of transformation that we can't get any information on, not for want of trying. I think we'll pick that up later in correspondence, which is really frustrating, where this help needs to be with you guys and the issues that you're articulating for us today. Suitability of placements has been raised a few times, but I just kind of want to go into that in terms of, you've also mentioned the school avoidance issue and some sensitivities around that, in particular that parents end up being told that their child's absence is unauthorised, things like that, because effectively the placement is not suitable. And we've heard examples too then of parents being prosecuted because the child is not going to school. Can you speak to that issue? How prevalent do you think it is? And just to understand that a wee bit more from you.
Yeah, no, we are seeing so many parents coming with that same issue. You know, the setting is unsuitable, so the child just cannot attend. You know, and again, there's no alternative education being put in place for those children, so it's just time wasted. The setting is it has to be right for the child. You know, I myself have seen both. I've been on both sides of a coin. So as previously mentioned, my daughter done the mainstream with 1-to-1. It wasn't a great year. And then she did get a place in a special school. And the difference in, you know, because this is where she needs to be, she is absolutely thriving, and it's so brilliant to see. And that really should be the case for every single child, but it is about getting the right setting. You know, it's not just about, here's what we're offering you, let's make do with this. That's not right. You know, and I get the whole inclusion part. I totally understand where that is coming from, you know, because everyone wants to be included. But there is a quote that really resonates with me, and you've probably seen it at our, you know, the campaigns that we've ran. Inclusion isn't just about inviting someone to the table, it's believing they belong there. And that's where I think there is a lapse here. You know, it's not just about giving the child a placement, it's about making sure that it's the right one for them.
Do you think it would ever be suitable for there be a punitive effect from the EA towards a parent, in the sense of when they refuse that place for those reasons, that there would be action taken against them? Do you think that would be justifiable in any circumstances when it comes to SEN?
I know that it does happen. I know that it's not justified, because, you know, it's not justified that a child is punished or their parents penalised because the child has needs that means that they cannot go to a setting which is unsuitable.
I think it would be very interesting, Michelle, to see if we could get the relationship between statistics between school people who are school avoiding or have met the threshold to get those sort of officers to come in, to then the relationship with homeschooling. A lot of families that get in that situation feel there's no other alternative than to remove their child from education, and EOTA centres are not always naturally offered the education in other settings. So what happens is those children, usually one of the parents, many times the women, have to remove themselves from the workplace and then become a full-time educator, which they're not qualified to do, with very little pastoral support. And then what happens in the end is they come to a mental exhaustion, and sometimes will result in hospitalisation for themselves. So it is a question at the moment. It's a system that just looks at numbers of how many times you don't attend school, and then it triggers that response. I don't think there is a child-centred or even an understanding of the SEN correlation of that.
Thank you so much. I just want to touch on the cross-departmental work inside of this, the particular health. I mean, we talk about it all the time, and we get the sense that health and education are not working together adequately. But can you give us a sense of just why that's so important to have therapists, SLTs available to your kids, to give them the kind of the full length of therapies that they need? Why is that so vital?
Sorry to have to cut in. If I could ask just for as brief an answer as possible on this. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Well, in my opinion, the therapies are part of the education. So if you think speech and language therapy is part of a child's education, teaching them how to speak and how to get that from them, as well, occupational therapy, they also teach children how to hold a pen so that they can begin writing. They also help with getting the children dressed, you know. So to me, it's all included. It should all be included under education, because they should work together to teach the child.
Also, it's their legal duty under the Children's Services Cooperation Act. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I really do apologise for having to clock watch. This is not a briefing. I enjoy clock watching, and I have to say, we have so much evidence. We would really like to hear from you. I think again we may need to take away just whether we have factored enough engagement with health into this process, and I'm already starting to hear echoes of my own voice from the start of this meeting as to whether this will extend beyond Christmas or not. So we'll perhaps have that conversation later. Danny, you'd indicated next.
Thank you, Dorothy. Fiona, thanks so much. And this is why it's so important to have the voice of parents here, because you have been watching our committee, and it's very clear you have picked up on what's being said to us, and sometimes it sounds all rosy in the garden, and it's far from the reality that is out there. I'm very lucky to have a great school in my constituency, and it's St George, and when I speak to them, and I speak to the parents from my constituency who children get that place, they describe it like it's the golden ticket. And I suppose my question to you is that a sense amongst your parents that it's a relief when they do get a special school setting? Then you compare that to then a child who may end up in a SPIM or out of school completely?
Yeah, I would say from the feedback we're getting, I think, to be honest with you, when parents are fighting for any place, you know, once they get a place that meets the child's needs, the relief is unimaginable. And even then, you still are a bit, you don't know whether to believe it until it actually happens, because things change very quickly. But no, totally, I would agree. With regards to the SPIMS, I think if the health was included, and you know, SPIMS can be quite good. We have parent feedback of ones that are really, really working, but there's just, in my opinion, too many that aren't working. In a special school, you know, you have the therapies there, and the speech and language therapists work with the teachers. So realistically, the teachers in the special school and, you know, the staff in the room, they're doing speech and language therapy every day with those children regardless. And then you have your separate sessions with the speech and language therapist. Whereas in a SPIM, you're not getting that. So your child's on a waiting list effectively. So a lot of children who are in SPIMs haven't even received any therapies and probably won't for 1 to 2 years. Do you know, that is not a lined up approach for a child's education. Do you know, it all has to come together. And, you know, if you look, for example, at the LIT teams, there is no health included, you know, in them. So for the EA and the health to be working together for the future, that's not correlating if they're not involved in that, you know.
And it's certainly not a child-centred approach then. And
No.
and I'm not going to put words in your mouth. It would be my view that it's then a special school on the cheap, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what we need to be moving away from. We need to be making sure the support and as a child-centred approach. You touched on the transport, and I think this is like, I don't know if they fully get it. I'm not blaming the staff who are on the other end of the phone, but I don't know if those who set policy actually understand how difficult it is for parents to get the child from the bedroom to the kitchen table, from the kitchen table to the front door, and then having to deal with that process of transport to the school. So I just want to give you the opportunity just to tell some of the stories of how difficult it is for parents, and when that communication isn't there, when the transport's not there, because usually say a couple of days before, but that's because we haven't got the children placed in the right setting at the very beginning when their peers are being set their place. And then you end up in this situation, but the stress and anxiety that causes. So if you could just elaborate on that there a wee bit.
Yeah, no, we have had so many parents come to us about transport this year. I myself have had massive issues with transport this year. Again, there is just, you know, whoever gets the tender gets it, but then you get a list of all these different drivers being sent to your door at all different times. A lot of our children, their drivers actually never turned up on the first day to school. So our children were left sitting on the first day. But it's also the safety aspect. But I myself didn't realise how hard it was until I had my daughter, you know, and it's only from me having her that I know how hard it is, you know, but the transport should be sorted out a whole lot sooner. We have one parent that came last week and they have their statement, they have transport in the statement, but the driver, the subcontractor, does other runs and couldn't facilitate her child going. So they were having to get an elderly relative to do it was, I think, 80 minute to and from twice a day, 4 days a week. They were then also having to take unpaid leave from their employers. They were having to turn up late to work. This is all just to get a child to school because they need that education. It shouldn't be this hard for parents, and we should not have parents coming to us saying that this is what is happening.
I think as well, Danny, through the chair, we would like to ask who is the legal responsibility from when a child leaves a parent's or carer's house to when they get to school, given what Dorothy raised about suitability of car seats, subcontractors and issues there, that if anything was to happen, and we do know in the past where children have been left on buses and because they were non-verbal, they weren't discovered, but who is that legal responsibility? Because we haven't been able to ascertain that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just one last wee point, and thank
just a
you.
comment, yeah.
It's wee quick, and it's probably a longer answer. I just wanted to touch on it though, because it's the statements, because you said it, and it's a massive legal protection for parents. We have heard it hinted by the minister himself that you shouldn't really need a statement to get the needs of your child met in school. We know there's an awful lot of support would need to go in to make that a reality. I just wanted you to put on record, how important is it to parents, that statement?
It's vital. Vital, because it's a legal right. And, you know, I can come here, I can say to you, the sky is green, but that does not mean the sky is green. So, you know, I can say there's support in all these places. That does not mean there is support in all these places. That statement is the only thing. And, you know, there's still so many parents having to go to solicitors, even with the statement. So that to me speaks volumes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
That's really helpful. And the statementing is again another one of those strands where we'll be hearing hopefully directly from the EA on to get a sense of what that looks like. And I think we also need to hear from the department as to what is clearly the long-term policy direction with that. David, you'd indicated next.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for your presentation so far. I think throughout, I think there's a lot of frustrations that will be recognised from our previous sessions and so on. Particularly thinking about the integration with the lit teams and just that general culture in terms of trying to get departments to sort of work together and integrate in that regard. Could I ask just around we're all obviously well familiar at this stage with the placements issue, and the frustration around that is completely understandable. And I think there's a recognition that there are many children that, even whenever they are in placements and they are getting to school, are not always in the optimal placement that, if all things being equal, we would like to see. Can I ask then, just on that basis and with that recognition, are you feeling that, is it just a capacity, like, is it primarily those frustrations are a capacity issue, so that there's a lot of people, there's more people essentially that need a special school placement than we have special school places, and therefore there will always be people who are in a SPIM or another some other provision that is not what we would optimally have? Is that largely the issue, rather than an unwillingness to place someone who there is a place there for, and EA saying no in that regard?
I think the capacity is a major issue. Obviously, you know, there are more places needed, but last week we got a parent coming through, and basically their child was statemented in 2023, so the statement was all in place. The parent put down 3 schools. They were told that no room in any of the 3 schools, and they were offered a mainstream with a 1-to-1, and the parent refused it. And it was only when the parent then sought legal advice and got in touch with the solicitor and with the EA that a place became available in one of those schools for that child. We see that happening quite a bit as well, normally coming up to the end of August, you know, as well. So I know capacity is an issue, but I don't think it's the only issue, you know, because places seem to become available. And, you know, as we've already said, the specialist provisions sitting there have already been funded by the EA. So the money's been handed over. They've been staffed. The staff are well trained. They have everything that those children will need, but they're still sitting empty to this day. There's no kids there, you know, so I think it's not just a straightforward answer. There's more than meets the eye with what's happening.
That was something. Sorry,
David, through the chair. It's not just capacity. It's consistency and child-centered and child-led, and when it works extremely well. But the problem is that the parents are always felt that, or they're made to feel that their valued contribution is lesser than necessary in the process. Thank you.
No, and listen, I hear that there are, I don't want to say good SPIMs and bad SPIMs. There are SPIMs that are doing well and have got it essentially, and there's others that probably need a little bit of work to and probably more support in order to do that. And we're talking about the health side there coming in closer as well. I understand that and accept that. It was just trying to understand whether that is just a case of, look, we all know I mean the plan has plans for more special schools, we all understand that, but it's a case of getting their finance. I'm not going to make a political point around financing and all the rest of it, but I think that's something we're all familiar with. Just on I did pick up on in your presentation where you said SPIMs were built sitting empty, did I get that right? Sitting ready with children.
Yeah.
What could I get very briefly? What is it that? What is usually the reason for that? That's not something I've come across necessarily, where everything's ready to go, but people aren't just using them.
Yeah, well, we aren't sure. It's the EA or the body who allocate places to the children. So, you know, it's the EA who are mapping the children to whichever school, and that. So we don't know.
Oh, that's fair enough. If you don't know, it was just curious because it's not
Yeah.
a circumstance I've come across.
Yeah, no, we're not too sure, but we know that they're sitting empty. So
It could be staffing, could be. I was unsure why that might be. Just then, I'll ask two very quickly together because they're related. Just again on the, well, I guess you've covered sort of the transport without the required car seats and so on, because I understand that that's actually relatively lucrative in terms of getting the contract and so on. If we're going to be spending money on that, we need to be doing that properly. But I also seen you said about the Access NI, where convictions have been flagged and where his parents. I can understand that. Can I ask, are these? I know we're getting in the grey area, but I'm sorry. When you say convictions have been flagged, there's I guess convictions and convictions. If someone has been a shoplifter 10 years ago, does that mean that they're dangerous to children? Probably not.
Yeah.
Are the convictions that you're talking about significant enough that you would be concerned that they would represent the danger to children?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean that's something. And has that been raised through yourself? I'll not ask you to go into it here, but has that been raised with the department by yourselves?
So it was parents' feedback. So some of our parents will take things further, others won't. So if we can't then raise it unless the parent gives us approval for it. I'm not sure if that particular one has been raised. There's been a few cases.
I know John had raised an issue here
Yeah.
in a previous session. I don't know if we followed up, but if not, probably it's something
we can check in on those actions at the end. I think that warrants some follow up for sure. Thank you, David. And John had indicated just.
Yeah, thanks. By the way, I think that was just superb, Dorothy, Fiona, expert by experience, as I always say. So that's what we need to hear. A couple of things very quickly. Stormy, obviously disruption is most acutely felt by children with special education needs because they like routine. Would it be your view that an app that would have allowed the EA to send a message out the night before saying, look, we're even considering potentially closing, we'll know by 8 o'clock in the morning, which is when they did their final decision, and then at 8 in the morning we're able to send a message to every principal who's then able to send a message to you, yes, we are closing. That would have made it easier for children with special education needs.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dorothy, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say because my daughter was actually in school already by the time we got the message, so it was then a case of who's going to get her, what's going to happen when you have more than one child. It's a scramble. So yeah.
Just something that I want to walk away from this with is some way that the EA can press a button and a principal gets a message and isn't looking at an email. And by the way, when I come in the mornings, I don't check my emails. There's other things I do first. Well, let's get breakfast or meet someone or have a meeting. So emails to me just don't. It's just a lesson. Probably applies to every department, by the way. So it's not a. Second of all, it's a basic one about risk, right? I have an interest in risk management. And this is more an observation that I just want to put in the record before I ask you a question of transport. Of course, if we say safety first, and therefore we're going to close the school at midday. Sorry. If that message gets conveyed late, what you could have is instead of a child in a very modern, secure school, a child, like I heard some children, sitting at a bus stop, waiting for a bus that doesn't arrive in the elements, and then frightened to go back to school because they might miss their bus. So sometimes actually the way we manage risk can increase risk. But let me just note that. On transport, I'm very interested. Okay, so our taxi driving system in Northern Ireland is very lax. What my understanding is that there's a taxi system license is run by the Department for Infrastructure. They check whether you're a fit and proper person. Then the next step is the Education Authority do an enhanced Access NI check. Now, why I say it's very, very lax is there was a chap, Brian Stelford, just an example, had 66 convictions. I wouldn't trust him to run a bath, never mind take people on taxi, yet he was approved for a taxi by the Department of Infrastructure, then pointed a gun at someone while saying coke. So that's the problem you have. So we really rely on the Education Authority to be 100% on their game, that person is never sneaking through the system to pick up your child with special education needs. Now, That's what I really want to dig into. Now, what I've got from the Department of Education is that 24 people last year were disqualified from providing the service to the Education Authority Service for Special Education Needs. So taxi drivers who were disqualified. I don't know the circumstances of disqualification. I'm going to dig into it. But my point in all of that is, does it concern you that there could be people with convictions? You've already raised it. And second of all, in relation to the taxi drivers that are turning up, are we 100% sure that the taxi driver that turns up each day is the taxi driver that's been approved by the Education Authority? So if that person went sick, would a taxi company say, well, tell you what, John Burrows can go and pick that child up? And that's what I'm trying to get at. And sorry for the long prelude, but when the rubber hits the road, are we sure, do you have confidence that the person that picks your child up for an unsupervised journey is the person that is approved by the Education Authority?
I think that's the question we want to ask, is who's got the legal responsibility? Because at the moment, when it is subcontracted, there is there's real concern about that safeguarding. Also, you said about enhanced NI disclosures. It's actually just standard, which doesn't even sometimes give the information that we would around suitability. But Dorothy, sorry, I cut over you.
No, well, you know, a taxi driver, the way it works is a taxi driver just kind of turns up half of the time and says, I'm here to take your daughter or your son to school. You know, so we don't know who's going to turn up, because we don't know who has got the tender till very, very late on. We don't know who the taxi drivers are going to be. I've had the names of about 10 different taxi drivers that were due to pick my daughter up so far this year, but hoping we've got it managed now. You know, so it's just madness every year, to be honest. There's no, this is the person that will take your daughter to school every day. You know, we have had a few different ones already, before, you know, and we're only in October, so it's the EA that kind of deal with all that. So, you know, I'm hoping that it's the right person, but I have no control if it is.
And this is where
brief final comment, John.
I think I just want to put in the record, we as a committee need 100% assurance as to the system and its operation that goes the step above. And I was told there is an enhanced check before they do EA work, but that the person approved by the Education Authority is the person who is doing the pickup, because they have unsupervised access to someone who is vulnerable. And then second of all, I'm keen to do a closer dive into the threshold that the decision maker thinks is appropriate in terms of previous convictions, because we are putting the safety of our children into the hands of someone, and we need to make sure it is absolutely the right person. And but by the way, see the child seat, £30 million a year spent in these taxis, and that's just unacceptable if they turn up without a child seat. There needs to be a reporting mechanism. And is there? Do you have a mechanism to very quickly say, Joe Bloggs turned up without the child seat?
Well, you have to then phone EA Transport to let them know. But you know that, you know, it's either you send them in the taxi to school or try and make alternative arrangements at whatever time of the morning, you know. So that's the only thing that we have is EA Transport.
Thank you, Dorothy. I think
cost recovery in that case is ridiculous.
We'll have to bring that to a close. I think there's quite a lot of transport stuff in the mix, which we'll pick up in terms of actions arising. So, Michelle,
I just had a written question on that specific question, but I can pick it up.
We can pick up when we'll pick up
all
all
of
the
accurate, but it
actions.
answers it for sure.
No, that's great. Look, thank you both. I think it's clear from the questioning that we could have run this session for longer. There's just so much ground to cover. We really do appreciate you taking the time to brief us today, and for your really thorough answers to bring that parental perspective to the issue. If there is anything else in writing that you want to follow up on, you know, in terms of further evidence that you didn't didn't feel you got to cover today, and you mentioned some of those personal accounts that you maybe wanted to share. I think that would be really, really helpful evidence for the inquiry. And we've noted, and also through the clerk, I'm sure, some of those specific issues that you wanted us to pick up, and transport is noted as one of those. Okay, look, so thank you both very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee.
All the very best.
Bye.
Okay. So, members, we're just to round that evidence session off. Obviously, a lot of that evidence will filter into the inquiry report. There were some specific questions arising from some of the answers that were provided there. Do members have a feeling in terms of whether we want just to get those noted at this stage so that we can pick them up in future evidence sessions, or do we think there any of them merit correspondence going today? Conscious on the transport, there's a lot we will have the EA in on transport, and I think an open public session for me is a far better forum to be dealing with that than by correspondence with the EA, would be my feeling.
I reckon saying the Minister did give some assurance that that was being looked at, wasn't there? Yeah. So
it would be good to hear on that. So I mean, are members content with that we log all those queries around transport to be raised in public session?
Yeah, Chair, if I can just come in there, I think the discussion as well around Access NI and safeguarding, I think, is something that keeps popping up. So just something I think we as a committee should continue to kind of probe and to continue to look at. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Look, we saw it with classroom assistants in the previous session with the committee that there were high numbers, not with those checks through, and we would need to have the same assurances around the transport end of things as well. Okay, Michelle, did you want to bring something in at that stage? Or?
I've asked, I'm sure most people here have asked direct questions around this in terms of the Access NI and stuff. And it's just because I don't want you to think nobody's asked these questions before and it's kind of hanging in the ether, but like the Education Authority did advise that all taxi drivers who deliver home to school transport must have enhanced Access NI clearance in place before being deployed on a service. And the EA will not award any contract to a private operator that this is not in place. Now, I know people may query if that is what's happening in practice, 100%, but I just thought when we're putting it out there that we must know the answers to these questions. I'm sure most people here have asked those questions already and have answers.
Yeah.
And just to move, when we have the discussion, it's to validate whether that information is what's happening on the ground, I suppose.
Absolutely. That's helpful, and I think it's important for parents watching as well not to be alarmist. I think we do need to have the EA in front of us to just ask the questions and to get all of that on the record. Okay, so I'm content that we'll factor that in for committee inquiry evidence. We have through the clerk inquiries noted that when Hansard with us, so we've plenty to work on for when we have the relevant officials in front of us. Okay, so we did have a wee bit of business at the top of the agenda, which is just meaning we're running a bit behind time. I just want to offer, if there is if people are keen to get a quick comfort break, and it would be quick, if we'll do that, to quick break, and we can just turn off the live feed, and then we'll come back to our next session. Okay, members, that's us back into open session. So that takes us on to the next item on our agenda, item 7, and it's an oral briefing by Department of Education officials, if we can bring them through there, on some planned legislation on GTCNI, the General Teaching Council. So I would refer members to the briefing note from the committee clerk at page 60 of your packs, and an Education Authority briefing paper at page 63. So as the witnesses are just coming through, we'll let them get settled, but joining us today we have Mark Bailey, who's the Director of Education Workforce in the Department of Education, and Alan Boyd, the Head of Teacher Education Team within the department as well. So you're both very welcome, and thank you for joining us today for this initial briefing on the proposed legislation coming forward. It's probably no real value in me setting too much context. You'll do that in your briefing, so I'll really hand over to you for any initial presentation you want to make. If I could ask for that to be up to 10 minutes, we'll move to question and answer, and we will aim to keep each inquiry for each member to around the 5-minute mark, just so we can get through all the queries. But you're very welcome, and over to yourselves.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name is Mark Bailey, as I've been introduced. I'm the Workforce Director in Education and Department of Education, and Alan Boyd here is the detail in terms of GTCNI. He's the head of the sponsor branch. So good afternoon, members. I'd just like to begin by thanking the committee for this opportunity to update you on the department's plans to reform the General Teaching Council of Northern Ireland and the progress we're making towards the introduction of a bill to deliver the changes. In December 2021, following an independent review of the performance of GTCNI's Leadership Council. Then Education Minister Michelle McElveen announced her intention to close and to replace GTCNI, which was a step that required amendments to existing primary legislation. This decision followed a lengthy period of significant dysfunction and underperformance by the Leadership Council, including 2 periods spent in special measures, and it also reflected the review's scathing assessment of the board and its committees, finding systemic leadership failures with toxic and irredeemably broken internal working relationships, which undermined all aspects of its operation. So as a result, the Minister stood down the Council at that time. Since 2021, under interim leadership arrangements and with departmental oversight, GTCNI has made dramatic operational improvements, particularly in teacher registration and governance. Engagement with the profession has also confirmed broad support for the retention of all of GTCNI's core functions, and this suggests that closing GTCNI would cause the department unnecessarily establish a new functionally identical body. So while a wide range of options were considered, the business case analysis concluded that reforming the existing body was the best way of delivering the desired functions at the lowest cost and with the lowest risk to the ongoing smooth delivery of those functions. So for these reasons, earlier this year, the Minister agreed a modification of the Department's preferred approach, confirming that GTCNI would be retained and reformed. Reforming GTCNI, however, still requires legislative changes, and so the Department has now drafted a suitable bill to deliver these. So turning to the bill, my colleague Alan here will outline its key features.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, members. The first major change which the new bill will introduce will be to the leadership and governance arrangements for the body. Its current 33-member council will be replaced by a streamlined 12-member board, and every member of that board will in future be appointed through a public appointments process which will shortlist applicants based on the skills and experience that they can bring to that role, their role on the board, and on their ability to contribute to provision of strategic direction, strong governance and oversight of GTCNI. Importantly, half of the positions on the new board will be filled by currently registered teachers, something which will ensure that the profession itself is still strongly represented within the body. Secondly, the bill will address some long-standing legislative weaknesses which have to date hampered GTCNI's ability to regulate the profession effectively. It will introduce independent investigatory and fitness to practice panels. It will establish a range of disciplinary sanctions ranging from reprimands through to suspension or prohibition orders. These will collectively ensure that it can take fair and proportionate action in any case where either unacceptable professional conduct or serious professional incompetence has been confirmed. The bill will also clarify GTC's ability to share information with the other teaching regulators in the UK and the Republic of Ireland, and will allow it to act on conduct referrals from the public, but only if the school and employers' processes have already been exhausted in those cases. Additionally, the bill will create 2 new criminal offences. It will make it an offence for a teacher or an individual with a deliberate intent to deceive to either falsely claim to hold GTC registration or to provide false and misleading information to GTC in seeking to obtain teacher registration. These offences, while small in number of cases to which they will ever apply, will help to safeguard the integrity of the teaching workforce. And for the same reason, separate from the bill itself, we are working with colleagues in the Department of Justice to establish a mechanism which will allow GTCNI to obtain and use Access NI disclosures as part of its assessment of applicants' fundamental fitness to teach. The bill will also introduce 2 powers which will not be activated immediately but are designed to support the profession in the medium to long term. Firstly, we intend to allow for the provision of a new category of provisional registration for teachers whose qualifications are judged to have minor deficits against GTCNI's qualification rules. This could help to prevent overly rigid application of those rules from becoming a barrier to entry into the profession, and it may even, in providing greater flexibility, contribute in some small way to the addressing of some of the subject-specific teacher shortages of which we are aware. While this additional flexibility would need to be implemented very carefully, we believe that this could be done without compromising the high standards that we currently expect from all of our teachers. Secondly, we will also provide a power allowing for the introduction of periodic revalidation of every teacher's registration with GTCNI, and this would require all teachers to periodically demonstrate their continuing participation in teacher professional learning. If this power is brought into effect, it could help to ensure that the skills of every teacher remain up to date and informed by developments in good practice and research throughout their entire careers, again enhancing the quality of our teaching workforce. As these are both significant changes, the Department has committed that before either of these provisions would be commenced, there will be careful consultation undertaken with teachers and other educational stakeholders.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So in terms of the next steps, the draft bill and its supporting documents have been approved by the Minister. A short explanatory video has been circulated to all teachers just on Monday of this week, inviting feedback. It's really an update for them, and inviting feedback on the bill should they wish to provide this. And so, subject to final Attorney General and obviously executive approval, we're aiming to see the bill introduced into the Assembly shortly after the upcoming Halloween recess, and hopefully through one of the executive meetings in November. So thank you for your attention, and we're happy to take any questions from members may have at this time.
Thank you. I'm conscious as we start this evidence session, probably that GTCNI is maybe not a body that anyone tuning in from the public is aware of, and I think possibly it may be part of the issue as to why this is needed, that for a lot of teachers they're maybe not completely clear what GTCNI does. So I wanted to start just with a question, just for a bit of point of clarity on that, just so I'm clear in my mind. Your briefing, and it was a very helpful and thorough briefing, set out the functions of GTCNI and around the sort of the registering and regulation of the teaching profession. That seems clear, but it then does go on to talk about the training, career development, performance management and standards of teaching. Can you help me just understand, because a lot of that stuff around the training, career development standards, to my mind, would happen at school level, under the school leadership and board of governor accountability structures. Can you just help me understand how the GTCNI's role in that space interacts with what happens at school level, just where those functions sit?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can maybe mention some of that, and then Alan might want to add to it. As with any professional body, they tend to have, or their role is very much around the whole professional, the promotion of the professional, and ensuring that everyone within that professional meets certain standards. So that obviously involves professional development and training. Now, you're absolutely right, Chair, that the actual practicality of training happens at a local level. But it's setting the standards for that and the expectations for that, and also potentially, and one of the future provisions that we were putting into the bill was around requiring actually continuing professional development. So there's a whole aspect there that a professional body should be responsible for, and the GTCNI has not been of late. I don't know, Alan, if you want to add to that, but there certainly is a clear role there.
I mean, GTCNI, if you go back, had been actively involved in that area. GTCNI has developed and published a set of professional standards and competences for the profession. Those standards are now recognised as being quite dated and in need of a refresh. But it was felt that it was important that the professional body set those standards rather than the department rushing in to dictate those, that it should be informed and controlled by the profession themselves, which is why we feel they do have a key role in those areas. It is very distinct from the roles of trade unions. It is about professional standards and adherence to professional standards rather than any of the nuts and bolts of what constitutes a fair day's work.
No, that's helpful clarification just from my perspective, and forgive my lack of knowledge on that aspect of it. I wanted to come to just how the council is likely to be made up. You've talked about the 6 teaching members and the 6 non-teaching members. Previously, the teaching members ended up in the role by way of a process of election. Is that something that was considered? I suppose I'm really just thinking in terms of ensuring that the teaching professionals on there are representative of the teaching community.
No, and you're absolutely right that the teachers have to be representative of the community on the board, and going back to the original issues that there were within the council, there was and we included this in our paper, but there was a Baker, Tilley, Miller, Moore, BTMM report, hard to remember all the names, but there was a report that was very, very helpful in forming the way forward. That was very clear in that report that because of the toxic makeup of the relationship, something very different had to happen in the future. So there was a clear recommendation there that the board should be through a process of public appointments. And that has been reinforced by our engagement with Capani, the Commissioner for Public Appointments, and we have engaged with them through the process of developing the bill. So there's a very strong advice that it's important that the board comes through a public appointment process in order to ensure that the right skills and experience are on that board. Now, to the point of teachers on the board, we absolutely agree that there has to be appropriate representation of the teachers, and the plans that we're proposing in the bill is that the board would have 12 members, of which 6 of those members must be GTCNI registered. So a half of the makeup of the board must be registered teachers. So that is to ensure that there is appropriate representation. So Alan, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add to that, but that's the background to the approach.
I think the only thing I would add is going back to some of the problems that were highlighted in the independent review. There was a consensus that certainly among some of the elected members in the feedback they provided to the consultants, they expressed the view that they themselves did not have the familiarity and knowledge of concepts around public sector governance, accountability, risk management, business planning, to enable them to contribute effectively to directing the board. So again, those are things that we will look to tackle in the round through a public appointments process. The report also did state that it would be important for a future board to be adequately supported by the department and to receive appropriate induction training on taking up their roles, and that again will be something we will look to return to with GTCNI as we move towards making appointments, but obviously that's a level of detail far below what we're considering within the bill.
Look, I want to give members the opportunity to come in, so I'll just one final question from me. There's probably not a huge amount else that I would wanted to ask. It's just really around that teacher feedback that I would hear, that they don't really feel that they have any understanding for the fee that they pay every year, what they're getting back from GTCNI. So I suppose it's really how can you assure the committee that with the fee, potentially an increased fee, which is referenced there, that the teachers will feel they're actually getting a representative and regulatory body that delivers something tangible for them as a professional?
No, that's a very fair comment, Chair, because we would still regularly get correspondence saying, why am I paying this £44 a year? And what benefit am I getting for it? And in fact, some people are saying when the organisation doesn't even exist, so some teachers don't even realise that GTCNI still exists as a registering body. So there is undoubtedly a case that we have to promote and sell, as maybe the wrong word, but definitely demonstrate the benefits of the body. We have engaged with the teaching profession throughout all of this, in that there was a public consultation in 2022, but there was also direct engagement with teachers, getting their input to get to the stage that we are at. On 2 different occasions. We've given an update this week. That's a 3rd occasion, actually. But initially it was very limited because the original consultation that we did in 2023, I think it was early 23, was during a time of action short of strike. So we got very, very limited feedback. In early 24, we went out with a further consultation on a short video. Much better feedback at that stage. There was around about 1,200 responses. So there is some level of understanding, and we had very good feedback there, where the majority were indeed in support of a professional body. But I think the case you're making and the comments you're making are very valid, and we recognise this even in talking with Ian Gallagher, who's the interim CEO in GTCNI. They and we realise we have a job of work during, and actually the promotion of this bill and the development of this bill will help us as it goes through the Assembly, of demonstrating the requirements. And I don't think we would get any teacher that would argue with the need. We need better regulation processes and also more training and development and professional standards. But your points are very valid, but we're very alive to them, and we have a plan in place to ensure that as the bill progresses, that teachers will be aware of the benefits that it presents. So.
That is helpful. I mean, I think if you look at an example like the GMC, I think even the public have a clear sense of what that body does and the role that they have, and that it has some teeth, and and that people understand what its purpose is. And I don't think we're there with GTCNI at the minute, and it's encouraging to hear that you're aware of that sort of job of work to do with the profession to make that case. Okay, I have an indication from Danny and a couple of other ones. Anyone else who wants to come in? I've picked John up there, but Danny, go ahead there.
Teacher, and thank you. You touched on it at the start, but the Baker Tilly review basically said it was broken. I'm just trying to, you touched on it in your opening remarks, but what has really significantly changed from one minister going with that recommendation of dissolving to another minister now saying reform?
No, that's a very, very fair question. There's really been a 4-year period, I suppose, in that, because obviously Michelle McElveen had decided to close the organisation in 2021, whereas the current Education Minister has agreed that we should reform it in 2025. So during that 4-year period, actually a very, very significant amount of work has happened, primarily within the organisation itself. I mean, the organisation itself is fundamentally different from what it was 4 years ago. We've had a new chief executive, interim chief executive and accounting officer has been placed in the organisation. During his leadership, there is now in place a settled staffing structure. So we have a very, very settled and a building experience in terms of the staffing. The teacher registration has gone through quite a number of radical improvements. There's a new teacher registration system. And in the past, newly qualified teachers, there would have been a lot of issues and complaints about not being registered quick enough. That has changed, particularly in the last year or 2 years since the new system came in. And the financial management and the governance controls are a world apart from where they were before. And just by way of example with that, there were a multitude of internal audit outstanding recommendations whenever the new chief executive went in, and he and his team have now reduced those down to a very small number. Internal audit have said that the organisation, rather than being unsatisfactory in their view, they now have a limited recommendation, and it's only limited on the basis that they need a board in place, and they can't. That's the one thing that's stopping them from being satisfactory from an audit point of view, and of course we need the legislation for that. And finally, there was a whole series of 2 terms of special measures, and last December they were formally brought out of special measures because the organisation itself has completely transformed. And the concern, to be honest, if we close it and open another one, it opens a whole raft of work and public money that would be required to shut down one organisation, open another one, TUPE transfer staff across out of one pension scheme into another, and you're opening a functionally identical organisation. So that was really why the decision was. So such a number of changes had happened in those 4 years that it made much more sense to reform the organisation, which is why we've changed the approach.
Okay. And one of the recommendations then you're going forward with is the 33 to 12 members for the board, and you've said 6 of them will be with the teaching profession. I'm just wondering who makes up the other 6, and how do you ensure that it's not then departmental led?
Well, I'll make a couple of comments, and Alan might pick up on that too, but it will be an independent process in terms of a public appointments process. So we would clearly have to set out what skills and experience are required. Now, Alan alluded to some of those earlier on around governance, financial control, some practical things that are not necessarily teaching profession skills. It's more an organisational type skills. So there will be very clear job descriptions and person specs for those individuals, and they will need to satisfy those criteria and come through that process. Now, we will, as I say, have reserved places for those 6 registered teachers. They still will have to demonstrate the skills that are required, but it's a much more robust process, we believe, to ensure that the right individuals are in there with the right skills. Alan, is there anything else on that that you want to add?
Not particularly. I mean, it's inherent within public appointments that you produce a skills set. SEPANI will assess and shortlist candidates or who have achieved the necessary standard. It is again inherent in public appointments processes that ultimately then those will go forward for consideration and decisions by the Minister. That is the nature of that beast. What SEPANI have told us is that this is a system which has proved very effective and is used in the appointments of almost all NDPB boards throughout Northern Ireland, and it has worked well for them. So, accepting that there is that concern, we still believe that this is the most robust way to produce a balanced board which across the piece has the right mix of skills in all areas to prove effective.
As part of the 2021 review, there was criticism of the department's oversight. I suppose my question is, what learnings has the department had there, and how do you see that changing within the new model?
Just have a brief answer if possible on this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, the 4 years, I think it was a wake-up call for everyone back in 2021 with what happened, and then sometimes you've got to break a few eggs to make the omelette, and that clearly is what happened back then. But in terms of responding to that, there has been a radical transformation in terms of governance and control in the last 4 years. So there is no way that would be repeated again from a departmental point of view. It has had that much attention. But also going forward, once we get a new board in place, it doesn't mean the department absolves all its responsibilities. There still will be a sponsor body and there will be oversight of that new ALB in the same way that there is with all the other departmental arm's length bodies.
Just one point, have the unions been involved in this process?
Yeah, no, the unions is a very, very valid point, because the point that you were raising earlier on, I'm involved in engaging with the unions all the time over teachers' pay and terms and conditions, and we have very, very good relationships with them. GTCNI has a lot of history and baggage, and the unions do not agree. Being upfront here, you probably know this anyway, but the unions do not support the approach of the public appointments. They want to be able to nominate members from the unions. We understand that, but we still believe that this is the right approach. But we have been meeting the unions regularly to give them an update. We met them 2 or 3 times this year, as recently as a couple of weeks ago. They get sight of what we're going to issue to teachers in advance. And whilst they have the reservations about certain elements, we've had very positive engagement with them in recent months. And it has been helpful to them, I think, and it certainly has been helpful to us, the process.
I think if I may add just one comment to that, another strength of the public appointments process is that under that every board member will be subject to an annual performance review. So there will be early sight of for want of a better terminology, anyone who was going a little maverick and disrupting within the organisation. There would be a much stronger means for the department to intervene at an early stage and address that problem, rather than letting it escalate to the point where the whole operation of the council itself was thrown into disruption again.
Thank you. Danny, Cathy, here next.
Thank you, Chair. So Collier and Nicole Sculliocta have completed 2 excellent pieces of research recently, and I sort of want to bring this, to the future as to what's going to happen. They launched one of them here recently, and we heard directly from Irish medium teachers the realities that they face and the difficulties that they face. But the pieces of research showed very, very clearly that there's a very specific knowledge, a very specific set of skills that's needed, whenever you're teaching through the medium of Irish, and when you're teaching academic subjects through an additional language. Is this something that you're aware of, and are you aware of that research? And is there any guarantees, or what is being done in any future guidance that's going to come down from GTCNI on this?
No, I was actually at that launch, actually in the Long Gallery. That was last week. It was the week before.
Yeah.
No, we are fully aware of a lot of that research, and what I'm involved in with the teaching unions as well is around teacher workload, and obviously there's a very specific issue there within the Irish medium sector. That definitely will be taken account of. Now, whenever you are developing competences, and as Alan said, they do need an update, and this is quite timely because it's an opportunity to reflect some of the special interest areas, for want of a better word. I guess you need to be careful when you're doing general competences, because you can't make them so specific to every subject that that could become too unwieldy. But that is definitely an area that is on our radar, and we will be fully aware of, and GTC will be taking account of that. In development of any competences framework, it's done in conjunction with the sector, so they will be contributing to that and making sure they are signed and bought up to it. And I don't know if there's anything.
I think the only thing I would add there is that again, historically, from I took up post in 2019, there was work ongoing to review competences at that stage under the department's Learning Leaders strategy, and GTC were actively involved. The CEO attended the steering group taking forward that body of work, and I would fully expect that a new CEO in due course would again be actively involved in those areas.
Okay. And I take on board, I do take the point about making these, very specific, but, I think there is an understanding now that Irish medium is so vast and is growing at such a rate that it probably does warrant something more specific for itself. So it's good to know that it's recognised and you were there, but will there be continued engagement then with that sector as we move forward? I think it's something that's really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, I sit on the management side of the TNC, which Maria Thompson is also is a member of management side. And I would meet with her regularly. So absolutely. And I think from recollection, and don't quote me on this, but I think that the Irish medium sector, they've developed a set of competences themselves that are very specific to them. Yeah. So there's quite a bit of groundwork there that actually can be leveraged and made use of. Okay. I hopefully can reassure you on that front. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Cathy. Gary, indicated next.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, folks. The question, one of the ones I was going to ask was around the unions, and you've effectively answered that. Just for my mind, apologies, I'm completely new to this. Haven't been on the committee for just a couple of weeks. The consultation piece with teachers, so a video has went out, and when I read your piece it said you hope to engage one final time, and it talked about further feedback. So you had already obviously sent a video, which you've just told us previously.
Yes. That
video was on what? So not on the new stuff now, it was on the general what the GTC does.
It was an update on what the proposed policy intention of the bill was. That was about 18 months ago.
Yes. And the other one was just sent when Monday, was it?
Yes.
And could we see sight of that? Could that be shared?
Of course.
That'd be useful. The other thing is, so you got 1,200 responses the previous occasion. Are you expecting similar this time round? And I suppose, obviously, you've indicated that the Minister intends to bring the bill to the House after Halloween recess. So those consultations, I'm assuming broadly, they've been the same vein. If people haven't seen this, I suppose it's hard to know, but I'm assuming it's the same vein. People will be broadly supportive of these types of structures. But how then will that be brought in alongside the bill and considered then through the relevant stages of that? Is that what the purpose would be?
A couple of comments. What we did 18 months ago was, and the video that was put out was a formal consultation with a series of questions that went with it, and all teachers were invited to respond to the questions and provided their input, and that did show support for the general proposals. Now, what we've sent out this week is more of an update. I don't think I could probably call it a consultation. It was an update that's gone out to teachers, but if they wish to, there's an opportunity for them to come back with any comments. We don't anticipate there'll be anything significantly different from what we've had before. It was more, I suppose, to the point, Chair, that you made earlier on about getting it on the profile of teachers, letting them know we were hoping the bill would come out soon. And we would expect the teachers and their representatives, the trade unions, will clearly get involved in the consultation process that you'll all be involved in and leading. And a lot of these things will be rehearsed and discussed again through that process.
That's fine. And in terms of the fee setting piece, talk me through, so it was a £44 annual fee. In terms of how that's going to be calculated going forward?
Yep.
Could you explain that first?
There's a £44 fee, tax deductible, so it doesn't actually cost you £44, but it is tax deductible. That's a good thing about membership fees. But it has been the same fee for 20 years. That was introduced in 2005. Once the new body is established and there is a board, it will be up to the board and the new body to determine its fee structure. That's included in the draft bill. And depending on what services they provide, how they can justify those, they will review the fee, and undoubtedly, I think we alluded to in our paper, it will probably go up, I'm pretty sure, and that particularly because it hasn't been looked at for 20 years. But it's wholly in line, and in fact the fee, the £44, is less than all the other jurisdictions that in the local area that charge a fee. So, you know, it is, but we plan in the meantime to demonstrate how the new organisation will not just do registration, which is what they're doing at the minute, but effectively regulate teachers and will be promoting the profession. So we want to be able to demonstrate the benefits that make it worthwhile. But ultimately, to answer your question, it will be up to the new board and the new organisation to determine the fee level.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I've got an indication from John, and no one else, if anyone else is wanting to come in, please do indicate now. John, you're in next.
Yeah, thanks. That was really useful. Just on the misconduct investigation and sanctions point, is the person who presides over misconduct adjudication, they'll be legally qualified, will they?
The detail will have to be worked out about exactly who's involved. The bill makes provision for a whole series of sanctions, and it makes provision for investigatory panels and fitness to practice panels. I think that's the right phrase, Alan, isn't it? Yeah. Now, the makeup of those panels, the bill does make provision for it should not be board members. So it's got to have a level of independence. But at this stage, there's not the level of detail, unless Alan will correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't gone through to the level of detail of exactly the makeup of those panels. It's just the nature of the type of individuals who should be in it. They should not be board members, for example. So we would need to do further work on that.
What's the ultimate most serious power, that the most serious sanction available?
Most serious sanction will be removal from the teaching register, which would leave the person ineligible to work as a teacher in Northern Ireland in any grant-aided school.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the misconduct case law is extremely complex. It applies across all the regulated professions. I would just say, in my view, I'll put it on the record that the chair of that panel has to be legally qualified. Otherwise, you'll be tied up in appeals, which you will lose, because that's just the nature of it. So there's my spoken. I used to do that work. Delay is one of the biggest problems in these misconduct investigations and adjudication panels. Will there be any timelines to make sure that there's not unnecessary delay?
Again, all I can offer you at this stage is a reassurance that we're trying to pick up on the best elements of the models followed by the other UK teaching regulators. So predominantly we've been looking towards GTC Scotland and the Education Workforce Council in Wales. There is an appreciation that justice delayed is justice not served. The systems that they operate generally appear to be that the processes go to investigation. A 3-person panel undertakes the investigation. As soon as they're able to report and provide evidence, that then goes to a separate fitness to practice panel who will weigh up the evidence that they've received and make a determination of whether a sanction is appropriate. We can't say at this stage what that timescale would be. Some of that will come down to elements of practicality within GTCNI. What we could say with confidence is that GTCNI will be looking to recruit a body of panel members to have them pre-cleared and ready to go. So as and when they need to convene either of those panels, they will have a body of people to draw upon straight away.
Does the Scottish body, the adjudication, let's call it the adjudication panel as opposed to the investigation panel, is that chaired by a legally qualified chair?
My understanding is that their requirement is only that one of the 3 panel members comes from a legal background. I don't know that it's necessary that they are always the chair of the panel. Okay.
The next one is in terms of recognition of sanctions. If someone, will there be a UK-wide list of teachers and their sanctions, or those who are actually disbarred from being a teacher? Is there mutual recognition of sanctions across the UK and indeed potentially Ireland? Or will there be? Or is there any option that someone who's actually got a sanction in England would come here and you wouldn't be able to see it? Or how does that get managed?
A couple of comments, if I may, first. There is a Four Nations group of all of the GTCNI equivalents that meets regularly, and they get together all of the time, and there are a lot of connections between all the teacher registration bodies in all of the jurisdictions. So there's very strong relationships there and a lot of cross-party working. This bill will also bring in a series of progressive sanctions. So at the minute, literally GTC can either have them on the register or off the register. There's nothing in between in terms of a number of different sanctions. So part of the process of developing all the detail around those graded sanctions will include about engagement with other jurisdictions. I'm not sure, Alan, we could say that there's a direct read across, but it's really just how there will be enough connection that links so that you cannot move from one jurisdiction where you've been barred to another jurisdiction and gain access, because they all talk to each other. So.
There is definitely an exchange of information which goes on already. Ultimately, at present, the most universal approach to a teacher who had committed, sake of argument, a serious incident or behaviour against a child, they would end up being referred to the UK Disclosure and Barring Service, who can access the full range of police information in addition to their own investigatory materials. If they take a barring decision, then that barring decision is confirmed to all of the teaching regulators. Therefore, that person will be removed by the relevant body. But there is also an exchange where a teacher seeks to move, say, from Northern Ireland to Scotland. GTC will contact, normally the person moving will request what's known as a letter of professional standing to show that they're in good standing as professionals, and they take that and they give that to the new body they need to register with. That body will always back verify the bona fides of that letter of professional standing with GTC Northern Ireland. So there have been a very small number, thankfully, of cases where people have altered elements of letters of professional standing, and those were picked up immediately. So it's a case that there is a system, and while we couldn't say absolutely 100% there would never be an omission, it works well.
And that's two questions will wrap into one. One is suspension remains.
John, if I could just, if I could just come in, we're running short of time, so maybe a final comment, perhaps.
Okay, I'll give you one. A lot of disciplinary profession regimes have an issue with people trying to retire during a disciplinary process. So let's talk about the upper end, gross misconduct. Is there thinking about how that is going to work? And if they did retire, what would then ensure that they were on a register that would show up so that they couldn't then reapply for a job elsewhere in the UK?
I can ask for a very brief response to that, please.
Well, I think it's probably worth saying these are really helpful questions in terms of the detail, and a lot of that detail will be worked out as the bill moves forward. I mean, they're all issues that we started to think about, but I think it would be unfair, or it's not right to say that we have got them all bottomed out yet, but do appreciate them being raised. So
yeah, I just thought they were useful. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, John. And yes, when we have a bill in front of us, no doubt there'll be very detailed scrutiny of a lot of those issues. One thing it may just be to put on the radar, really, following on from some of John's questions, be good to sort of see when this maybe is more fully formed, what protections will be built in as well to protect teachers from sort of spurious misconduct allegations, who maybe have a very robust complaints process might have been delivered at school level, and someone then takes it to the next stage. It's again just to ensure we want robust regulation. Absolutely, we want to know the people teaching in our classrooms and that we're entrusting the care of our children to are fit to teach. But we also wouldn't want teachers to be exposed to reputational damage, into the spurious cases. So it's just to factor that into the thinking going forward as well. Okay, no other indications that I can see. I suppose the clerk's just flagging for, which is a useful question in terms of just the time frame. When do you anticipate? I mean, is it sort of shortly after October recess? Is that really where we're looking?
That's the plan. The Minister has approved the bill. All we are waiting at this point is the Attorney General's nod, effectively. We've already had DSO certificate of competence, so we are hoping that we would get it. If that's done within the next few days, we would want to be getting it off to the executive members with a view to them seeing, hopefully introducing it to the Assembly in a meeting of theirs in November. That's our plan. So,
okay, well, likely be seeing you again soon.
We look forward to the committee stage.
Okay.
So,
thank you both for your time on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, not aware of any issues I think that are picking up for further correspondence. Are we content to close that evidence session?
Yep.
Thank you. So there was item 8 on your agendas, which was the end of session committee report, but we're going to just carry that forward to another agenda, as the clerk had advised. There were just a few sort of last minute tweaks and additions needed to go in there just to tidy that up, so we'll come to that at another meeting. So item 9 on the agenda is correspondence. So there's items in tabled papers, and then in your main packs, pages 70 to 97. As usual, there is a summary note included. That's at page 70. So we will, as usual, go through any items that require a committee decision or discussion. Otherwise, everything will be as per that summary note. So there are 2 items of correspondence which I'm going to propose to members we take together in closed session. We have item 9.3 on page 79, and that is correspondence regarding a court decision in relation to the prosecution of parents of a child for non-attendance at school. And there's extensive correspondence from the parent has been received. So I'd want to suggest, as given the sensitivities around that and the naming of an individual child in there, that we should take that in closed session. And I would also want to suggest to members that we have at item 9.10, and that's in tabled papers, page 9, I believe, for contact from a parent group that we've heard from before around specific concerns at an individual special school. Again, as a child is named and an individual school referenced in quite a degree of detail, I would want to propose we take those 2 now in closed session if members are agreed. Great, so if we're happy to move into closed session.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
So in closed session, the committee considered correspondence regarding a recent court decision, but that is no longer sub judice. But the committee nonetheless agreed to commission some legal advice on the options available to it to address this issue. And then the committee also moved on to another piece of correspondence from a group of parents from an individual school. And in the first instance, the committee will seek to have an informal meeting with the group and the EA.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll go through the rest of the correspondence. So item 9.4 on page 80 of your packs, it's correspondence. Sorry?
I said EA, sorry. With the Children's Commissioner.
It'll be with the Children's Commissioner, that is right. Item 9.4 on page 80 is correspondence from a number of individuals, not connected, but all corresponding on the same issue, which is concerns really around the subjects covered by the bursary announced by the Minister in relation to PGCE courses. The committee has already written to the department seeking further information on this. I just want to check in to be sure of where we are on this. I know certainly in a week that I wasn't in the chair, I think it was Kathy perhaps raised issues, and we corresponded about the process for announcing this, and that
so
did we agree on
those and
so we have two bits of correspondence. So we have
subsequent again.
Yeah, so we've reflected I think in our correspondence the concerns that are coming through, so our members content we just write back to all of these individuals to say there is correspondence in the pipeline for it to come back on this if we're agreed.
Yeah.
Great. Item 9.6 on page 93, it's correspondence from Northwest Counselling. They're providing further information with regard to its request to brief the committee on the need to introduce a counselling programme for primary school children, referencing something to succeed the Healthy Happy Minds programme. Now the committee had initially considered a request from the group for a meeting back in June, and we had asked them for a written briefing, which this is what we're receiving now. So I would want to suggest there are possibly two ways to deal with this, and I'll bring you in a wee second, Kathy. I think it's been a while since we've looked at the issue of mental health and wellbeing in schools. I think it feels like an opportunity to possibly bring in either the department on the emotional health and wellbeing framework or EA on wider operational work around wellbeing, alongside an evidence session with this group, who I think they're raising really, really important points. So time permitting, it's likely to be after Christmas, but I would like to suggest that's an appropriate way to dispose of that. Kathy, you'd want it to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I read that. There's a lot of detail within it and benefits of it, and it's something we have talked about before. Like, I think we could all be agreed that the Happy Healthy Minds, whenever it was cut, we all were contacted about it. It was such a vital project that really seen hands-on support for children, and there's just something flowing out that it might tie into, and it's the whole concept, and we're hearing a lot about it at the minute about, we were at an event yesterday about the non-attendance and how it ties in, and I know that's something that we've talked about, emotional based school non-attendance, following up on as a committee as well, and it's probably something that's interlinked too.
This might be a good starting point, and if we got a briefing from the department, also I think department probably feels a better fit because they're responsible for that attendance policy as well. So, our members agreed with that approach. Cara, you had indicated to come in there.
Yeah, Chair, just very briefly. I've had the pleasure of meeting Raymond and so have my colleagues, and he really is fantastic. He's seeing each and every day, dealing with children and young people, just what they're up against. And just to echo Kathy's point, I think what better time than to talk about emotional based school avoidance. And in his briefing, he talks about COVID was the biggest thing to happen children and interrupting their lives since World War II. I think that's a very fair statement to make. And I think he'll offer us sort of unique and fresh perspectives on where we can go from here to make sure our kids are taken care of. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Cara. And I think for me, the other thing that just came out of the correspondence that sort of struck me was we do have a commission service in our post-primary schools, but we talk so much about early intervention, and that's the area where we're not doing it. And it's just that question of are we definitely, putting resources into the area where it's most needed? Not to say we should be diminishing the post-primary service, but the fact that we have one and not the other really does, it was quite highlighted really quite starkly for me in that correspondence. So we'll take that one forward. Then. Item 9.8, page 97, it's a response from the Education Minister regarding the School Uniforms Guidelines and Allowances Bill. It was particularly around the concerns we've had highlighted to us by NIPSO. I think we had an amendment which went through further consideration stage around NIPSO's role in the process. Our members on that basis content to note and refer the reply on to NIPSO if they do want to come back to us. Great.
And lay it in the Assembly Library as well, because it's a ministerial assurance about the bill.
That would be great. Thank you. Item 9.10 we've dealt with in closed session. Item 9.11, page 11 of tabled papers. Apologies if any of these page numbers are inaccurate. It was just with that last update on tabled papers. But we have correspondence from a group of stakeholders in relation to the anti-poverty strategy and how it interacts with some areas of education policy. I think this is an area. Again, we struggle to cover the issues that we want to in committee because there are so many of them. I don't think we've had a real look at the educational disadvantage and the impacts of poverty and hunger and all of those issues on the education system. I think it would be an appropriate time to invite this group of stakeholders to brief committee. But again, I think it is likely to be after Christmas, and we're probably going to need to be feeding that message back to a lot of people seeking to brief us at this time, if members are agreed. Item 9.15, correspondence from the Department of Education on SEND placements, and I do want to highlight this correspondence in a little bit more detail. So it came on the back of some questions that we had asked as a committee in relation to placements and some specific financial questions that were asked. I have to say this correspondence is raising some concerns for me in that there seem to be no costings coming forward around the SEND reform delivery plan, nor does there seem to be any costings going to come forward in relation to the transformation projects. There's a generic assurance that there will be accountability and transparency, but yet the costs won't be published. I can't understand how we can't publish costs, but that is being suggested to the committee as full transparency. I'm genuinely struggling to understand how we're meant to interpret that letter. So I think there's an accountability issue arising here around the costings of this, and I think it is. I don't think it should be lost on members that we are really quite now far advanced into this plan. My understanding is we are 2.5 years into a 5-year plan. Now, I'm happy to be corrected by officials because I know that we started partway through the financial year. Regardless of that, the clock is ticking on this mandate, as we all know. And I think if at this stage we're still seeking this level of financial clarity is concerning. So there's also the issue around this word that I'll try and pronounce correctly, nomenclature around SEN, the language around SEN and the terms that we use, that doesn't appear to now be a priority, even though it was put into the plan as an initial action. So I put all that out there, and I'll hear from other members in terms of their views. I'm not sure that going back with another letter is probably of any great value, as we're going to be hearing from the department, but I would want to make it very clear we should be noting these concerns for that evidence session coming forward, or potentially for the Minister. But if other people have views, that we maybe need to do something else with it at this stage. But in terms of correspondence that we've received in this committee from department, this one just leapt out to me as raising a number of concerns. I think Michelle and Cathy had both indicated. Michelle, bring you in.
Yeah, no, this was such a disappointing response from the department. The reason we wrote to the department in the first place was largely because we've been asking questions of senior officials who weren't able to provide any detail to us about any numbers or any resourcing. So we wrote to get that clarity, and to just get a letter saying we're not going to give you that clarity is unacceptable. It's a basic thing for this committee to understand what the finances and the resourcing is around the stuff that we're scrutinising, and to be given a letter like that is really dismissive of the committee and its job. And that big figure, that 570, I mean, I think we're right to question, where did that come from? I just think like it was pulled out of the air now. There's no actual costings. And I think for other bids going forward and other programmes that are going forward, is that how we're doing our numbers in the education department? We're just pulling them out of the air. Like, it's not good enough. And these are serious issues. This is SEN we're talking about. And those transformation projects in particular, I think we've been asking questions on that, and to get no clarity is really, really concerning. And I feel strongly, but this is not for theatrics, I feel really strongly that this is very frustrating to get that kind of response back.
Yeah, I think on those public sector transformation projects in particular, that the letter actually is at pains to highlight what a good result it was for the department to get that money, and then they won't tell us how they're going to spend it. Really, it was not the response I expected. Cathy, if you want to come in.
Sure. Yeah. So to me, I agree. This response was, it feels like it's very dismissive. It's very dismissive of us. It feels like the department is saying, just trust us. Just trust us with this money. We'll deliver it. We sit here week after week, scrutinising department officials. The answer always is the SEN delivery programme. Yet when we ask for details of it, we're just, to me, this is just like, I don't know, so dismissive. And, you know, whenever we're questioning, we have genuine concerns. We have genuine things that we want answers on, because this is what we're being asked. And they're hanging their hat on this, and we can't get answers. Whenever, as a committee, we're asking these questions, it just takes me right back to the guidelines issue with the school uniforms. Trust us. I don't trust, and I would certainly be asking, yes, the department to come in, but we want them specifically on these issues, so they know that these are the questions we're going to be asking, and they have the answers for us.
No, agreed. I think it's. I don't think we've asked for anything that's unreasonable, and it's a disappointing response. Anyone else want to come in at this stage? No. Okay. Well, I think, have you noted those concerns in terms of that from your perspective, Aileen, and then we'll look at how we address this when we have the department in. Okay. I've no other items to raise. There were a number of things for members' diaries, so I'd ask members just to note those, and obviously to respond to those organisations and those invites if you're able to attend. Okay, so members, that takes us then to the end of correspondence. Are we content to dispose of the items as per the summary note, other than the exceptions we've discussed? Agreed. Item 10, forward work programme. So I'll ask the clerk to speak to that first of all. You'll find that in your packs at page 106, and then we can raise any issues arising from that.
Okay, so members, this is filling up quite well. You can see up to Christmas. There are a couple of weeks where there's like 2.5 briefings sneaking in, and the last few weeks of November and the start of December, we hope to have the DE perspective on SEN policy just broken down, because in previous briefings it seemed like really a lot. So that's just broken down as per the terms of reference that you all agreed earlier in the meeting. And yeah, I mean, given all of that, a study trip, really, there wasn't really time for a study trip just now, but that's not to say that there isn't still a budget for that, and that perhaps we'll find a location that will cross maybe more than one of our strategic objectives in the spring.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's great. I'll just draw two points probably. I'd want to suggest that when we're back after October, after the Halloween recess, I think that would be a good point to maybe take stock of where we are with the SEN inquiry, and if we have a sense that we need more evidence sessions, we probably need to just call that as early as we can. I don't want this to sprawl, but I also want to make sure we do get the evidence, and if there are stakeholders who are important to this, or indeed if we haven't heard all we need to hear from the department and the EA by Christmas, I don't think we should have an artificial line on that if there is more evidence to be heard. Are members content with that as an approach for a review? The only other thing I would add is just on the 26th of November there we have EAD joint briefing being suggested. I think it was the department came with that on the SEN alternative support model, but also the literacy inclusion toolkit. And literacy and the specialist literacy support is one element of the services that are going to come out through the local impact teams, but I think it's important when we go back to them on that briefing. Very happy to hear about it, but we want to hear a lot more about the alternative support model than just the literacy inclusion toolkit, and there's an awful lot more, and I imagine that session will cover the local impact teams in some detail, but I think we're still ironing out just the detail of when the department will be in, but we'll get there. Are members content to endorse the forward work plan as currently drafted on that basis? Agreed. Item 11 is any other business? No other business. And item 12, date, time and place of next meeting. So the next meeting scheduled for Wednesday the 15th of October, 2 p.m, room 29 and online. And that just leaves me to put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Great. Thank you,
Thanks,
members.
everyone.